Hello, everybody, and welcome to another PMP end of month review. Why, what is that? Well, that is the Painters Motivating Painters, our Google Plus hobby community that is all about helping you take your next step on your hobby journey. As always, I am joined by an illustrious panel. It has become 33% more illustrious this month as we have our first ever guest reviewer. We're very excited to have him along. I'll kick it off with his introduction. So we're joined by Dallas. Dallas, how you doing, sir? You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dallas Medill. I'm up in Alberta, Canada. I've been painting for 30 years now. And yeah, I run the Alberta Miniature Painter Society of Alberta up here and bring in painters and been in the hobby for a very long time.
We're very happy to have you along. Dallas won't spruik it himself, but I will quickly mention it that Dallas has been behind the creation of a couple very excellent figures and busts, the most recent of which I was just lucky enough recently to get my hands on. I'm very excited about. So we're very happy to have him along. He's a great and talented artist with a really nice vision. So it's very good to have you along, sir.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Also joining us, it's the usual crew. They're much less exciting, but we're still excited to have them nonetheless. It's Eric and Kieran. Eric, how you doing, sir?
Doing my best to make it exciting and new this week.
There you go. That's jazz hands always sells.
And jump cuts. Jump cuts.
Wow. Are you going to get to doing calisthenics on screen?
I'm trying to make something happen.
It's important to get the calories in. You know, you got to burn them off somehow. Yes. Also joining us is Kieran. How you doing, buddy?
Good. I am very excited to double our Canadian content.
Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about it. Eric, we're getting overwhelmed here.
Yeah, it's now 50%. Next month you guys will be out.
This is like a reverse War of 1812 situation here, I think, is what's going on. I'm on to it.
Depends on which propaganda you follow.
So what are we all here to do today besides talk about the illustrious history of America and Canada together in our shared peaceful border? We are also here to talk about all of the end of month review submissions in the PMP. So as previously mentioned, this is our Google Plus hobby community where every month our artists make pledges, show their progress, and then eventually post up their finished projects. Now, if they have a finished project that they would like some special critiques or commentary or focused feedback on, they post them under the end of month review tab, and then we review them every month in this video. So, as always, that's exactly what we're going to do. If you want to join us on your hobby journey, why, look, right down below here, why, there's a link. You can click that and join the community. We'd love to have you, whether you are a beginning painter or a longtime master with years and years in the hobby. It doesn't matter. We all have our own next steps to take, and we can all help each other take that next step. So to that end, I'm going to say this at the top and at the bottom, and I say it every month, and every month I mean it. We enjoy doing this video. It's a lot of fun. I like giving all this feedback. I very much enjoy seeing all this work, but we are not the ones who make the difference. The people who make the difference in the community are all of you who are commenting, who are giving feedback, who are answering questions every single day. So every time I load in a post, I see tons of comments and feedback and help and critiques, all positive feedback, helping people out. That's what I love. So if you are already doing that, thank you. Keep it up. You're the hero that makes this community great. If you're not yet, hey, and you see a post that you like, stop in there, say, hey, this looks really cool. You like this aspect, you like that aspect. Give some positive, focused feedback. If you see a question you know the answer to, answer it. Put somebody on the right path. So with that being said, gentlemen, are you about ready to begin? Have you focused your mind, body, and soul together into the review mode?
Ready to launch.
All right. So one other final quick note before we get going, which is just as you're watching this in the last month, it was announced that Google Plus will be going away. Sadly, I'm quite positive we were the most successful Google Plus community. Like, I think we are the outlier, which is a shame. Most Google Plus communities never really hit, but this one has always been tremendously fantastic and full of wonderful people. Worry not. We will find some replacement. There are many platforms out there, and we will figure out exactly where we're going to land sometime in the next 3 months. We have until April of 2019 to figure that out. So there's no rush, there's no worry, and there's no panic. We'll get there. This community is great. We've built it, and it's full of a bunch of wonderful people, and we're going to keep it. So there we go. All right. With that being said, and all panic hopefully allayed, let us begin our reviews. Okay. So we're going to start out here with Johnny Mac. Johnny Mac says he hasn't posted in a while, but he's got a little quick speed paint for a D&D mini. So let's take a look. So, you know, Johnny says he posted this, or he painted this in about 45 minutes. And right off the rip, what I'll say is this is a great job for 45 minutes. So he did this mostly with like washes and glazes and stuff like that. And then he was going for, you know, kind of a shadowing of beard stubble at the lower part of the face. What I'll say is overall for 45 minutes, this is really great work. It looks fantastic. It sells it. You've got enough differentiation. The paint actually looks quite clean. It reads. As a D&D mini and as a speed paint, I think this is an overwhelming success. Now, some quick things you could do in a speed paint fashion to take it up even another step. Probably some brighter undershading and value sketching. I think about on the face, on the hair, on the fur here, maybe even on the cloak. So then when you lay down your washes or your inks, you get more tonal variation showing through. With the fur, it's not as much that there's not a bright spot. It's that the fur is universally the same across horizontally. So you may want to think about, like, say, making the middle of it a brighter white or a black. So you see this a lot in natural fur, where you'll have like a black stripe and then maybe 2 white stripes and then brown on the edges, like a wolf or something, a timber wolf or something like that. That's a possibility. As far as the beard stubble goes, I think it does sell. I like it. I think it's actually quite adroitly handled there. What I would recommend is that you may want to up the value on the brighter parts of the face. So say the side of the forehead, the nose, maybe this part of his cheek right here. So that could be done with just some quick glazes of a lighter flesh tone or something like that. Because if this looks a little brighter, the contrast of the beard stubble will sell more, you know, because you'll have something darker. The darker part will contrast better against lighter skin. Okay. But all in all, I think this is really well done. It looks like a fighter or a ranger or something like that should do. I'm sure he'll do well on the D&D table. And for a quick project, I'd call it a great win. So well done. All right. Any other thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, that seems like a fair thing for me.
All right. Then next up, we have our Blue Marine. And I believe, Kieran, you're handling this one. This one's from Lloyd Hiller.
Yeah, Lloyd's been knocking it out. He introduced himself a couple months ago to us with a pretty smooth Space Marine paint, and he has picked up where that's left off. So I want to start there, and I want to say that Lloyd is now building upon what was already a really great foundation of him being a good student of other painters. The first thing we notice about all of his stuff is the absolutely smooth application of paint. There's no problems with that at all, and he's carried that on. The particular thing that he wanted to talk about with this, though, is the face of this model. So let's go to there. A couple of last frame shots are the ones that show the face. So he's already added character to this. Instead of just painting a plain old face, he's got some eye gouge and some bruising on the cheek and that kind of thing, and adding a great deal of depth to it. And I think all of that looks great. Like, the character is there. It's framed really nicely. If I'm to give any critique to it, I think that there's just a couple of spots that you can go a little bit brighter, Lloyd, and that would be on the top of the eyebrows, and then the nose itself, and then the tips of the ears. So you could go a little bit lighter flesh tone on there, because those are the spots that are going to catch the most light, because they're promontories that stick out. If you can think of it much in the same way as what you're doing on your armor edging on here is a really super pale blue. It's nearly white. And I think you can think of it the same way, that you're almost going to white in a couple of those spots to get those light catches. So that's really all you need to do on the face. I like the idea of the scarring and bruising. Maybe you could, and just one little extra thing, is where you have that bruising underneath the, I guess this is the left cheek, the right side of the screen for people watching. A little bit of tiny tint of purple surrounding that a little bit, I think would sell the bruise a little bit more. If that is in fact what you're doing. If you're doing a muddy smudge, then maybe not. But I think what you're going for is bruising. At least that's what I hope. So give that a try. It's only a couple of touches. You're about, what we're talking about here is about probably 50 seconds worth of effort, as long as you're putting it in the right place. Now, the next thing I want to touch on really quickly, that's kind of along the same lines as a segue into it, is on the gold as well. You can pick out some light points here, which go to a very silver. I see you got a little bit of silver in there, but I think you can sharpen up a couple points of that. Here, for me, it would be not just on the inside wing segments, but also on the top side of the outer wing segments as well. Needs a little bit more shine. And then also, you can broaden up what is just right now a simple edge highlight of the gold. And you can broaden that a little bit up on the top side and then lose it on the bottom side. So what I mean by that when we're looking at this head on is if you look at the right shoulder pad beside his gun, that one is upward facing, so it could have a broader silver streak. But on the opposite side, if you look at the left side, underneath the arm, there should be virtually nothing silver there because that's an entire shadow. Okay. And then the one last thing that I would leave you with as an otherwise excellent model early in your career of painting is maybe now that you've mastered all the smoothness, it's time to get a little bit dirty and bring a little bit of dust up from this desert landscape that this guy's shuffling through onto his boots. You can dirty that up a little bit because you've already done that character into the face. I feel that the other parts of the model could use a little bit of character additions as well. So I'll just leave you with that thought as far as future works and things to sort of stretch your hobby muscles a little bit more. Yeah, so that's what I'd say about this, guys.
Right on.
Next, Space Marines.
Indeed. Very, very clean. Like such clean application. All right. Next up, we've got these Black Templars. I don't know. Darker color Space Marines.
Dark Angels.
No, they're like green or something.
Are they?
Yeah. These are like Black Templars, I think.
I think.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to pull out one of the two things that I've ever known about 40K right now.
Okay.
And that is to say that the Deathwing segment of the Dark Angels is black.
Oh,
so maybe that's what it is. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, am I right about that? Anybody out there in
No,
that world corroborate that?
No, I just know them from looking at their boxes. That this is, I don't know if any other chapter uses these same models, so it's possible. Yeah. Nick does not say what they are. He does say that these three make up 15 total models that he has painted. He's working himself towards 5,000 point army. But he's only 500 points in. And the best I could tell looking online is that these three would maybe make up 100 points. And it took him 4 months to do this amazing paint. And if you look at, you just mentioned how clean it is. If you look through all these photos, you're going to see probably some of the cleanest, smoothest, paint and highlighting and, subtle, shadows in every single one of those wings, etc., or feathers on the decoration and on guns, etc. Super clean, super tight, all that kind of stuff. Here's my concern. He says, looking for any areas to improve. And here's my concern. If we give him any more steps, like right now, it's going to take him about 16 years to get that
that 5,000
point army. So I don't want to add any steps. So I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe some techniques that he could use to go a little bit faster in some areas. So some of those obviously, the first and foremost, there are some things that would be cool because you've got such a clean style everywhere. Getting some dirt on those tires and that sort of stuff would be a really cool offset to that. Wouldn't take long. There's definitely some pigments and such that could be used to great effect using alcohol or water to get them on there. The alcohol evaporates, the pigment stays on. Those sorts of things that can go really fast. He does already look at your inspirational videos, Vince. And by that I mean your painting videos, not the ones where you tell people how to be their best selves. Oh wait, those are the same. And so Vince has got some great videos on simple ways of adding pigment, etc. for dirtying it up. But man, all the things that I would want to tell you is how to go faster, and I think that's only going to come with time. With if this is your 15th model, as you get through them, you're going to go through more. Perhaps doing some more. How do you batch paint? The nice thing about this scheme is that you're starting with a black base, probably a black undercoat. If you can. I don't even know if you're using an airbrush or not because everything looks so cleanly applied. But if you can do your next layer is also black with an airbrush, that's half of the work. Well, not even half. That's like a quarter of the work done quickly. And then you've done a great job picking out things to have color so that these guys don't just look like black models. You've got the robes, you've got the wings, the feathers on those designed wings, and the bolters and the chainsaw all have the red on them, and all that looks great. Unless my only fear though is dry brushing and those sorts of things on feathers is going to start those looking chalky, and I don't think you want to do that. So I'm a little bit so then I guess the only other thing to do is to add things on there, so it's going to take you 6 months for the next 3 bikes, and that would be just more kind of dirtying it up. Give me some scratch marks, some denting, some flecks coming off of the chain sword, some gore or something coming off of those front fenders over the tires, etc. But the paint job's so clean. I'm at a loss for how to help you improve.
Do you want? May I jump in with some options?
You can certainly jump in.
Okay. So look to a video I uploaded about 2 weeks ago, where I talk about how you base coat quickly. Okay, and my recommendation is if this is taking you 4 months, then we have either you don't have a lot of time to paint. So if that's the case, and you're just like, you're only getting to paint a few minutes every so often, okay, cool, no problem. Now, if you're painting regularly and it's taking you 4 months, then the perfect is the enemy of the good. Okay, so I want you to watch my video on how you do, contrasting quick wet blended base coats, and I want you to stop base coating cleanly. I want you to get messy. I want you to paint fast and messy. I want you to prime with a zenithal type, even with rattle cans, over a white, and I want you to paint this fast. Okay, I want you to get a big brush, like a size 3, 4, 5 brush. I want you to get some wet paint and some flow aid, and I want you to go nuts. Okay, and I want to see you be able to lay down a base coat in less than an hour to achieve what you did here in less than an hour total. Maybe not like the shading and stuff with the base colors on. Okay, you can do all of that, I promise. And if you try it the first time and you can't do it and it looks messy, try it on another fig. And the point is that then you can refine. If you get to even a messy base coat state in an hour, sure, let's say some paint's where it shouldn't be. Okay, go back and clean it up. A little bit of cleanup. If you spend an hour doing a base coat that has some transition to it, as I show you in the video, and an hour cleaning up, you've still blown your old time out of the water, and you're going to have a ton of tonal variation. It's fast, it's easy, it's fun, it's low stress. That's my recommendation. Because what we really need to see is things like, at minimum, if we're going to stick with the hard black, then we need to see things like the edge highlighting happen and stuff like that. And that is all going to take more time. But if we go for some quick wet blended base coats on things like the guns and the armor and stuff like that, we can have some really nice transitions. Or the cloak, where you've got transitions, we can achieve those in just minutes and really save you some time. So that's my advice.
Yeah, if we are giving, yeah, that's a great point. And when I was looking at these, I also wondered, is it a matter of time? A couple of things. If you can have these set up on a tray, or if you don't have a dedicated space, and if this is your 15th model, it's unlikely you've carved out space in your home and said, hey, I'm always going to be painting here. Get a tray or some sort of little kind of portable box where you can have your models and the paints that you're using and a wet palette all ready to go, so that whenever you feel the itch to do it, that you can. And give yourself 15 minutes, 30 minutes to a night to work on these, and that'd be another habit or kind of behavior that would help you. So,
here's one more thing I've got, and I promise I'll let it go. Don't try to paint 5,000 points of these guys. Don't do that. Really don't. I mean, I know that sounds fun. Like, yes, I'm going to have this big giant army. It's going to be amazing. I can do it. Don't kill yourself like that. Like, there's so much of a wild world of things to paint out there, and go until it's an absolute chore and then stop. If it remains fun up to 5,000 points, cool. Then go all the way to 5,000 points. Okay, that's fine. But don't feel like you have to do that. The number of people who I've seen set a huge goal like that and then just stop. They just stop painting, and they stop painting anything because they're like, well, I really want to paint this other thing, but I'm not going to paint the other thing because I said I was going to do my, these guys, the thing I made a commitment to. I guess I just won't paint. I cannot count the number of times I have seen that happen, and I don't want that to happen to you. Okay. So if it's not fun, stop. Paint something else. It's a big, wide world of stuff to paint. You can paint whatever, and it's all good. You can always return back to these guys and do more. Experiment, have fun, play around, do whatever. There you go. That's my thought. Okay, now I'll stop.
Awesome. Congrats on number 15.
Absolutely. And what I will say is my final closing, I lied, is they look really, because I'm a big liar, is they do look great, man. Like, what I'll say is, for the amount of time it took, you really achieved a great looking result. These guys, I agree with Eric. They're wonderful. They're clean. They're sharp. They will definitely look wonderful on the table. So well done. Now we just got to get you achieving the same thing faster, and we can do that. Okay. Now I'm really shutting up. Dallas, over to you, buddy.
Hooray! So, do you want to walk on the model there, Vince? So Scott painted this bust, and he said his big concern was he wanted to do it all in red non-metal metal. And he had some questions about choosing the proper plinth for your bust. So I think we'll talk about the plinth thing first, because it's real fast. When you're doing a plinth, you usually want to try and pick a material that suits the model itself. So on this model, there's probably no wood going to be around where this guy is. So I would go with just a black resin base, or paint this base all black. It's also going to make your red pop more. As far as the non-metal metal, I think it looks pretty good, but more contrast. So you want to get those shadows darker. On the gun too, you want to get some more contrast. And he had a question about freehands on it. You don't have to do freehands, but if you added maybe like a number decal on the shoulder pads, I think that would add a little more interest to the model overall. Overall, though, I think it's done really well. The backpack is awesome. Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to fill in, feel free. This is my first time, so.
No, you're exactly. I think that's good. It's good feedback. I completely agree with you on the contrast, and I think what we would mean here specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dallas, if this is what you were thinking, but like when we look toward the front here, like we don't have any place where we go dark enough, right? Like up under here where this is really hidden, we would want to see some like really strong, like black and purple infused shadows.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. You just need to take your lows, your darks darker.
Yep. And then smooth out those white highlights a little bit. You want your white to be nice and smooth and sharp.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you want a smooth transition. It's more contrast that's needed, not metal.
Yep. It is simple but true and tough. Simple to say, hard to accomplish, but very true.
Exactly. But overall,
So,
I think the model looks awesome.
Yeah, Dallas, to elaborate on that a little bit more, then, do you have some thoughts of most painters who struggle with red, that when they highlight it, it goes pink, or when they shade it too much, it goes brown? How do you have any thoughts on how to mitigate that from happening?
Personally, on painting red, from a lot of painters that I know that are top tier, their biggest thing is you want your brightest red to be your highlight. So like your blood red would be as high as you would go, maybe a little bit of orange past that, and then shade down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I found one that I can recommend for folks. It is Vallejo's model color of Hull Red. Is a very deep red. It is almost brown, but it's still, to the eye, reads as red. And I think that's been the best deep shadow red that I've come across. So let me recommend that one.
Love me some Hull Red. Use it all the time. It's a great color.
Yeah, sanguine base is actually a really good way to shade red. Also, it's got, yeah, I think the biggest thing is make sure that your highlights don't go pink. Like, keep your reds red.
Yep.
Okay. Agreed. All right. Excellent. Okay, so gentlemen, let's keep moving. We've got more stuff to do here. All righty. So our next up, we've got, let's see. Well, I'll take my own thing and I'll do that quickly. I just really posted it here so I could share and talk about some stuff with it. So I'll do that, and then I'll grab Aaron Daly's Black Dragon, since my own piece is just going to be a quick discussion thing. Then we've got some gross Nurgle. So Kieran, would you like to jump on the Nurgle from?
I couldn't have put it in a better way.
All right. And then let's see. We've got a big giant Draika power armor from Emil. If Eric, you'd like to take that one. And sure. For this awesome, fun, multicolored crew from Sumer, Dallas, how would you like that? Does that sound good?
Got it. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So let me start out with this piece. I just want to quickly talk about my this Knight Titan. So this was the third Titan that I did here. And just something I wanted to talk about with it is just a couple techniques and kind of the idea behind the thing. If it's going to actually load the image. There we go. Thank you. I like painting these big robots. I think they're really fun. And what I want to point out is that this is sort of the third big one I've done with this. And what I found is that each one is a chance to experiment in different things. So, for example, even though they're all done in the same basic techniques, when I've done non-metallic colors, not NMM in the elements of them in the freehand, I've changed my recipe every time and experimented with different stuff, with different reflection points, placing reflections actually on there that go off the painted element of the NMM. Playing with stuff like OSL and light points, playing with stuff like the launching missile, the smoke launcher here coming out of that, and glowing lights and things like that. So all I say that to do is, no matter what level you're painting at with a piece, and even if it's part of an army where you want to be coherent with the rest of your forces, every piece is a good opportunity to experiment, even with little things. So never miss a chance to just push yourself in an unusual way. So for example, like right here on this blue light, I thought, to really sell this, it would be more realistic to me if it cast just a little bit of blue out on the white of this armor. So I played around with some blue glazes to see if I could get that nice image of it just kind of catching along the edges and flowing out there, right? Same down here with the green searchlights, right? Now I'm sure that Kirill would yell at me for putting a green light reflection onto a red piece of armor, but it's fantasy, so I'm good with it. But everything is just, my point is, don't just breeze by stuff. If you have a chance, you can use the existing techniques, but I think it's easy for us to fall into a thing like, oh, this is a leather belt. I'm going to paint it this brown and this wash and this highlight and done. And right? Whereas if you're already comfortable with the miniature, it's exactly the time you should be thinking about experimentation. What could I do differently here? Could I push myself with a texture, a different technique, a thing? And the fact that you're comfortable with the rest of the figure gives you the liberty and the chance to play around with that stuff instead. Let you push yourself in little ways every time. So I just wanted to encourage people for that. So, okay. Now, on to Aaron Daly and his big black dragon. First ever monster. All right. Well, I love monsters. So let's talk about this dragon. Yeah, so right away, he looks good, and what I'm gonna focus on here is stuff specifically for larger figures. So when it comes to larger figures, a couple of things become critical. And that is the techniques that you would normally use are going to serve you less well across the broad, flat, open spaces that are often present on large miniatures. What I mean by that is when we look at things like this black dragon's skin and his big wings, things like just running a wash across them, which is I can see we did here because I can see our coffee staining, right, is going to serve us less well. We have bigger components to everything, like his teeth, his horns, everything is bigger because it's a big monster. So that means we need to take all our techniques up another level, right? So when we look at something like this skin, you can, instead of the washing going over it, you may want to think about stuff like, and layering back up. That's fine. But it's a smooth black dragon. Here's another way you could do it fast. What if we took a sort of roundish brush or an old brush or a flat brush or something, and we kind of attacked it and stippled it with just a very light amount of kind of a near white gray paint. And then I ran some thin black over it, right? Like maybe some thin black paint instead of a wash, and I got a few good even glazes. And I created this pseudo scale effect on the top. That'd be fast to do, but it could be a way to create some interesting variation and really make him stand out. On things like the wings, when you get this big open flat space, you want to make sure you show the delta in the wings between what's near the bone and what's out here in the middle. So generally that means, you know, some directional layering or something like that, where the wing has gotten lighter as the material is stretched right out here toward the edge. Okay. Or sorry, toward the middle. And so you just want to think about how can I push up a couple individual elements in it to bring out the fact that it's a larger creature and deal with the expanded space. You know, when it comes to things like the elf, I actually think he looks really good. I like the way, let's see if I can get to a really good shot of him here. Nope. Okay, that's side shot. That's my best one. That's all right. So like I look at the elf and he looks pretty good. Like his armor looks nice. I like the skin tone. You went for this like you have this purple. Like all of that looks nice, and that's because he's in the normal scale, right? He's what we're comfortable with as far as technique goes. And it's clear to me that you're adept and comfortable with these techniques. But when we expand them out to this big size, they don't always serve us as well. So for example, like the horns and the teeth, these should be coming out brighter. Like we should get to a brighter tip here. You've got a really nice variation going. Keep it up. Come all the way to just like right there should be almost pure white. Right? So like this should be slightly brighter and then brighter white. Okay. And in the same way, then you can do that with the wings here. You can play with some additional colors here. Or by the way, you could do it the other direction. You could take some thin washes, pull them toward the bone. So we get darker colors here. We go either direction or both. But overall, it's a really cool monster. I do want to see some more stuff with the base there. I'll assume that you're waiting to put this guy on a big round base. You were waiting for his new, like, I'm just going to assume you're waiting for his 120 by 92 oval to come in, which that's fair. I accept that. But let's make sure that's the other really final critique I want to impress upon you. When you're doing a big centerpiece model like this, okay, like the dragon, this guy is like the center of your army. He's your general. He's Mr. Important. The base needs to go all the way. right? Because it is the centerpiece of your army. It's what people are staring at. So we don't want to shortchange that. We want to do something big. We want to do something great. I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of basing videos. So take your pick your poison, whatever you want to say. Okay. All right. But awesome submission, man. I love it.
I want to say that I think you're doing him a disservice thinking that he wants to put this on an AOS base and not just use it for his 9th Age army.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Never heard of it. No, I'm just messing with you. Tell you what, you can fit one of the chariot bases onto this thing's 120 base in AOS. So what I'm actually expecting is he's going to do a modular base, so you can drop the chariot base onto the 120 and you can use it in both games. Yeah, because this will fit into its AOS base, like without any overhang. So you can make it totally modular. Everybody
Let's go look at Nurgly bits next.
There you go.
Okay, so this is a glorious culmination for Thibaut, who's been doing some Nurgle stuffs for quite a while here. He makes mention that this is, in fact, the culmination of his Nurgle 40k army. These are the last bits. So maybe a bit of a relief for a squeamish guy like Vince, who maybe gets to see less Nurgle in the future.
I mean, it's endless.
But we're gonna lavish ourselves with these ones first. I actually want to carry over a little bit of what you were just last talking about, Aaron's piece with his bones and teeth. And let's first look at the bones on this thing, or rather those horn spurs that are coming out the back of these guys. Look at how much transition he has in here and the overlapping of the fingers of transition that he goes through. That I absolutely love about this sort of rotten look of horns that Nurgle guys do. It's only really a little bit of an exaggeration on what it truly looks like, though, because it is a lot of fingers of striations that are reaching into one another, and we talked about that kind of stuff before. The next thing that I want to talk about that attracts me a great deal here is how he's done his coppery metallic stuff, right? And he's done a lot of verdigris on these things. In fact, if you flip ahead a frame where we get a tighter shot at the front side of these guys, this one in particular, look at all this great color that's going on in here. You know, he's going into a sort of an almost pinkish red color of that copper, and then the teal or turquoise of the verdigris going on in there, and it just adds such a lot of interesting variation throughout that. Now, whether it's correct as far as how copper really rots or discolors, who cares? It's a fantasy model, and it looks great in doing so. Now, similarly with his other metallic stuff, within the mix there, he somehow gets it to read a little bit greenish too, which pairs in very nicely with this whole Nurgle composition, with the green armor, etc. And that's where I'm going to transition to talk about the armor itself. So that's all done very, very concisely. You have pock marks and rot holes and things like that, which I think read very well, and you can see those from a distance. I think the thing that I would say is one of the weaker things in here is the contrast. Because you've done it on all the metallic stuff, the contrast in getting the deepest shadows of these armor segments is something that you could press a little bit further, especially on these hard armor segments that go on the shoulders. And when we spin it around the back, we see those leg segments on the back of the leg greaves. Those should be, I think, a fair bit darker green on the underside of those things to shape it a little bit differently from a distance. While we're here on the back, though, I also want to talk about these cloaks and the draping that you have in the red. Part of what I'm reading here, Thibaut, when I look at this, especially with the middle one, is we have a lot of sort of what looks like little scrapes and touches and spots of color, very rough color, on the middle cloak. So I am a point where I'm thinking, is this meant to be rendered flesh that's just been beaten up a little bit and then draped from here? And if so, I think you'd be served by having your deeper recesses this a little bit more purple than it is. It reads a little bit purple in the darkness, but I think you go a little bit further on that one. The other thing that strikes me about that sort of patchwork stuff that you've got in there to add texture to it is it feels pretty random on a model where everything else looks very deliberate. And it's just a sort of a general feel thing that I'm sharing here, that I think that because that looks random and the rest of it all looks very deliberate, I think that stands out a little bit as you stopped short of an otherwise great effort that you've done on every other aspect of these models. Now, I do appreciate that, as we talked about before with those Deathwing Angels, that you don't want to spend forever on models. So I'm not really knocking you to say that you have to do that, because you spent umpteen hours on this army as a whole, and I'd actually would like to see at some point pretty soon here a nice army shot of the whole, so that we can see what you've achieved over the course of this to come to this culmination. Because I'm willing to bet that when we see this all spread out, it will be pretty amazing to look over, even for those that don't like looking at Nurgle. Yeah, so I think those are the key things that I wanted to say about this. Great achievement, my man. I'm glad you got to the end of this Nurgle, and I'm sure that we're going to see some other great things from you in the future too.
I agree on all counts, especially on how good that copper is. Love it. All right. Next up, Emil. We've got our favorite power armored dryad.
So Emil, this is his first time posting. Last December, he came out of a 17-year hiatus, built a number of models, and started painting in January. And entered these. He's from Sweden, if I read that correctly, and came away from his first event with some painting awards. So first, congratulations, Emil, for the awards. Second, thanks for this is his first post, I believe, as well, in the PMP. He's been lurking a long time, and he wanted to showcase. So we've got a Drycha, we've got an Alarial, we've got a Maw Crusher, and a couple other things. And I think the thing I wanted to point out with these, I'm going to have zero. He wants to enter Golden Demon, so I'm actually going to suggest, Vince, if you take a minute, if not here, then sometime soon, to look at this stuff. But one of the things I wanted to point out, a couple of things here. I want to point out how, and he does this in Alarial as well. He has this kind of core color, and from that color, he moves out into his palette. So in this case, there's kind of this green that moves out into reds and into yellows. In Alarial, there's a brown that moves out into the greens and the reds. And similarly, that one's similar to Drycha. One of the cool things here that I think, when we talk about kind of our triads of color, he does this cool thing with the armor bits on the arms and the armor on the orc riding it, where the yellow is kind of making this triangle pointing up, and then he's got just random, I don't know if they're colored from seeing the lavas coming up and shading the tops of those arms, forearms, but it adds another kind of triangle pointing down, and it kind of interlocks those colors, and you're just moving up and down and all around it. A lot of cool, a lot of warm, and that sort of thing going on. If you zoom in on the face of that Maw Crusher, you'll see kind of that same kind of thing, starting with this core color of a brownish red, and then moving into these different colors, etc. But obviously, just amazing work. I love the oranges and the kind of brown orange up to the yellow as kind of the palette for that, adding a lot of dynamics to the armor in this case, especially. and you can see a lot. I mean, even in the veins over on that left-hand side, you can see a lot of attention to detail in hitting those things, etc. If just even looking at this piece, if I were to pick out one thing that you could probably take a little bit further, is going to be the bone. And that guy has quite a bit of bone on him, but those teeth and bone read a bit flat and read a bit. They could have more depth and could stand out and be, I think, given. I don't know. I don't know if they need to be more prominent necessarily, but certainly have kind of the travel when we talk about the, from the dark to the light that you put into other things in the model. Like even the top of his head is going from a blue to a green to a yellow. The horns, the teeth and stuff should have maybe a little bit more attention as well. But just an amazing kind of out of the gate, hey, look who I am. I'm Emil from Sweden, and I got something to say. And these are really impressive, and I wish you good luck with aiming for that golden demon. Yeah.
What I would say is, yes, you absolutely should enter. And I'd say that to everybody, regardless, because it's a great learning experience. On a deeper level here, by the way, I love this lighted up element in here. Like, way to go all the way. But first off, I want to talk about his basing, and I will sum up how I feel about his basing like this.
Oh man, too much. Wait, no.
Like this is straight up. We gotta pull out the Aquaman quote for this one. My man, like this is so good. I love everything about it. None of that really matters for Golden Demon because they don't care as much about basing, but it's beautiful for every other thing in the world because it just looks amazing. And I love the way you've set up all these bases. They're gorgeous, just absolutely stunningly gorgeous diorama scenes. Okay, so I'll give you feedback on. Let's just take Alariel here, and we'll talk about Golden Demon. And I'm certainly not the foregone expert on this. I mean, there are many people. You can look at Gareth Nichols has a great blog about how to win a Golden Demon, and I would listen to him above me because the man's won like a lot of them. Okay, so if we look at like when we get to everything, we want to make sure that we're focusing our detail and attention on everything that we can. So what I mean by that is like you use color really well. You have compositionally an incredibly good eye, but we want to make sure we're taking things as far as they can go. So for example, when I look at her leaf wings and the wood here, is the contrast as high and smooth as it could be? I think we need more to bring out that wood, especially edges, things like that, brighten them up. Same with the leaves to really bring some of that out, brighten up these tips. You go into the red and but the transition's dark, the end is dark. Up here, when we go into this yellow, I would love to see more of these individual hashes brought out, stuff like that. You really, really, really want to focus in on the detail on these big monsters, okay? So that as the judge looks closer and closer, there's more for them to discover. You want them to feel like they're not even sure they've seen everything yet because they keep discovering things on your miniature. With your metallics, I would push your shading some around a little more, like on her headdress. Get some more, sort of variation in there. Control the light a little more on that. When it comes to things like the carapace of the beetle, I think this actually looks really nice. You may want to look at even a little more variation here. You're doing some very nice touches. Go a little farther. When I look at things like these claws, they're rather uniform. Right. So what I want to see is this come out a little farther. Same with these edge ridges, right? Picking out these details. When I submitted my Lord of Change, which, I really tried to hone in on every detail on Max, as I was talking to Max afterward, he noticed that around the mouth, I had missed a couple, really pulling the light and highlights of the detail out of 3 or 4 tiny muscles that are on the side of the Lord of Change's mouth. And he was like, I really would have liked to see those highlighted more. I mean, I had stared at that figure for 100 hours and hadn't noticed them. And he noticed them in 5 minutes. right? So you really want to make sure that you're taking everything to its maximum. That doesn't necessarily mean you're pushing the contrast as far as it can go. Like you're not trying to make everything look non-metallic, but you want to make sure that where there are supposed to be highlights, where there's supposed to be variation, where you're creating visual interest, you're doing so at every opportunity. That would be my advice.
I want to jump back in real quick and to your point, go back to the Larial, any of them with the wings. Sure. I think that, and this may, I don't know if this is just the lighting, but to Vince's point of making sure you're touching all of these feathers, but I love that this top ridge that's hanging down the underside is in dark shadow compared to the lower feathers that are, you know, going to be turned upward a bit more and are getting up to the bright yellow. I would say make sure that every feather looks like that the judge could tell that you paid attention to it and you worked on it, but not necessarily that everything is getting treated with the same color. Like the contrast he's got on here, you know, the underside of the carapace is being in deeper shadow. You know, there's a lot of that contrast and attention to kind of light and dark that I really enjoyed. You know, you look at the Alarial from here, this front view, and you can tell like there's just so much depth even from this distance and that small of, you know, definition in the leg and in the torso and in the cloth and stuff like that he achieves really well.
Yep. All right. But there you go, man. So I stand behind my original statement. Enter. Even if you don't win anything the first time you enter, who cares? Sit down and talk to the judges, get their feedback. There will be no more valuable use of your time ever. Okay? These look beautiful. Great work, man. Great work. I hope to see you in person at a GD event next year. All right, Dallas, we've got the Sylvanian Undead.
All right. So overall, I think the warband is brilliant. I really like the fact he's done some object source lighting on the eyes. It really draws attention to the faces. I think the biggest thing is just working on cleaning up the edges between the bone and the different materials. Like on the one model here with the shield, the arm really stands out to me. But other than that, I think it's just a little bit more contrast he needs to add to the different elements. But for a warband, for gaming pieces, I think they're brilliant. Maybe look up some tutorials because there's dozens of them online on OSL if you really want to make those faces pop. But overall, I think aesthetically it works really well.
I think he asked a question about the banner. So have you got any recommendation for him on the banner? What do you think would work there?
I would do a skeleton wearing the same hat that everyone else is already wearing.
Oh, I like it.
The hat and the plume.
Yep.
I think it would work really well. But overall, yeah, I think the warband is brilliant. I love it. I love the basing. You could even maybe play with pigments on them a little bit. Would really add that next level. But I think they're awesome. I would love to play against this warband.
Yeah, it looks really good. Let me throw a question at you, Dallas, and tell me what you think about this.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of the challenges with silver armor is that and we have very white bone and we have very silver armor, and of course the highlight of silver is white, right? So actually from a distance, when we zoom out, what we notice is that like it's actually kind of difficult to distinguish the silver from the bone, right? So what do you think about adding some more rusty elements, some more browns or even really oranges to the silver to darken that down and make the bone actually stand out as being quite bright?
Yeah, I think what he could do is, like you said, he could dirty up the metal too. That's the pigment thing would totally work to help out with that too if he wanted to play with that technique. But darkening up those weapons, making them look a little more aged, would definitely add some more contrast. But on the other hand, I think that the weapons, just keeping everything close and subtle, works with this army.
Right on. Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts, Dad?
My favorite business on here is his use of those locusts on his his leader's model. And he's painted them up like glowy green flies to mix in with the glowy green of the eyes on his skeleton boys. That's a really good touch. I like that.
I agree. It brings some of that color down too. It creates a nice color triangle on the leader model between the lantern, the eyes, and the locusts, right?
Yeah. Well, he's fitted it in on those feathers also. He's got or reeds or whatever those are trying to be coming.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
That reads nicely.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Good stuff. Heck of a warband. That's for sure. Looks nice. Absolutely. I dig it. Okay. So let's see. Next up, we've got Corentin. I'm probably butchering that. That's fine. He says first time poster, long time gray plastic owner. So I'll grab this one. These are Dark Angels, right? They're green. That sounds right. Let's see. Ryan Easterling brings us the last model in his army, and then he's got his whole army on display. Dallas, how about you grab that one? We're going to throw some 40K at you.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right. And then Bento's got a dwarf character for us. Kieran, I feel like you haven't gotten to talk about dwarves in a while. And then Steve Wallace is bringing us some little familiars. So, Eric, how about you grab the little familiars? Sound good? I'll assume that sounds good. I'll assume everybody's still there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's start with Corentin. So first time post, he says he's working on a kill team. He hears tonal gradation is all the rage these days. Okay. He's trying to work on more natural highlights with an airbrush, though color intensity and general airbrush handling are things he struggles with. He says he promises he works on his basing in the future. Oh, and that's funny. His last comment is, if this gets picked up, have fun pronouncing my name. Yep. Nice. It's a well-known thing that I suck at names. So sorry, but it's funny that he even knew in advance I was going to suck at it. All right. So let's dig in, man. Let's take a look here. We've got our guys in pictures in World Star mode here. All right. So just quickly scanning through. Here are some things that jump out at me. Okay. Which are, we need to separate some of the elements. There you go. This is the perfect shot. So like generally what I see people do on Space Marines is they put these shoulder pad ridges. They do these in a metallic color, right? As opposed to making them the same color as the armor. And the reason for that is intentional, is because it breaks up the color palette from being just universally that. Now, you have some very strong edge highlights. Okay. So what I would recommend, if you're gonna, I don't mind strong edge highlights as a technique for Space Marines. When you're doing Space Marines, you kind of have a choice to make. Do I go with more of a natural lighting highlighting, which is not edge highlighting, by the by? Or do I go for the hyper stylized, like heavy metal look of edge highlighting, right? Where we're highlighting the things on the outside at the highest high. Both are perfectly valid, but you have to make a decision. Now, if you're going for natural highlighting, then we want to focus much less on just like tracing edges around like this. And you want your edges, when you do trace them, to be very, not that many steps above the base color. And that's what I see here. We have a very dark desaturated, almost black green, frankly, as the green itself. Whereas the edges are this like Escorpina green. This very high yellow green. I think ideally what I would, if you're going to go for the edge highlighting scheme, then what I would say is these guys should be a couple tones up into more of a true Dark Angels green. This is a little too dark. It feels kind of like you went over a black like primer and didn't get enough white or something, or lighter color underneath there. So I think if you brought up the tone a little, the edge highlights would feel much more comfortable. As it stands now, you've got to be very careful with that like yellow-green color because it communicates this sort of like radiation nuclear waste color. And I don't think that's what you want. But if this was a warmer, more greeny green, even still a Dark Angels green, this would feel nicer. If you're going to go for a natural highlighting, then you don't want the edges to be this striking at all. And you want to focus your light up here, right? This area of green and here, you know, and here and up here, these should be much brighter and more truer greens than what's down here and under here, right? Where it'd be cast in shadow. You can get to that quickly with something like a zenithal highlighting scheme or whatnot, but my basic recommendation would be to go down either lane, but just push yourself so you're not going quite as far with your edges. Same with the red guns. We want a little more variation there. Draw some dark colors, fill in your panel lines. You know, like this part here, they aren't dark. Finally, on the metallics, tonal variation, name of the game. I have lots of videos on shading metallics. You'll want to look at those because a lot of these steels, we're using like a bright silver here, and we don't have enough shadow in them. We need to get this light more under control, more darker steel colors worked in within this silver as your contrast point. But overall, these guys look good. I mean, like you're working your edge highlighting. There's a few points where you kind of go off and you get a little thick, but for the most part, you're applying these pretty cleanly. And that's a big challenge for people. So you're already a good step up over where a lot of people are. To be able to apply a nice, smooth, clean edge highlight is a difficult thing. So I'd say well done on that. But look forward to seeing more. And if I butchered the name, Corrington, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to try the last name. Who boy? Nope. A pass. All right.
Do you want to try a handle on that, Dallas, with your French skills?
My French skills, yeah, all of them, all 0. Bonjour, bonjour, Harold.
There you go. We have now reached the limit of our combined French skills.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, we've got a couple from Ryan Easterling. I was going to start here, Dallas, on the single figure and then move to the army if we want to go that direction.
Absolutely. If you go to the next picture of the same guy.
Yes.
Gives us a little better view of what's going on here. I think he was asking that he just wanted to figure out how to take his stuff to the next level from here. I think a lot of the stuff that we just talked about on the last Space Marine Army group applies to this model. So just taking his highlights up a notch on everything or going darker. It'll work either way, but I find that if he does either of those things, it's going to make all the details on this model pop. He could work on making sure that his differentiating between the different, like on the necklace here and everything, just cleaning up to make sure that those lines are really sharp. If you zoom in, you can tell. I mean, this model's been played with too. It's got a little bit of wear and tear on it, so I'm assuming that's just something he's going to clean up later. But highlighting or shading is the biggest thing that he needs to apply to this figure.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely.
As a first step, figure out those things first, and then from there we can grow off of that.
So when we look at the whole army, here we go. Some of this we've talked about in the past, but I think you'll probably have some of the same feedback. Although anytime you finish an army, it is a great accomplishment and to be celebrated.
Absolutely. It's the same thing. The army looks great. The display board looks awesome, and the whole army complements each other really well. There isn't one glaring piece that doesn't look like it doesn't belong there. But I think it's the same thing. I think the next step for him is shading and highlighting, more contrast. The battle cry at every painting event everywhere from judges is more contrast, and then learning how to achieve that.
We like to call it over here at the PMP Club the tonal variation dance.
Yes. If somebody took a drink every time I said tonal variation, they'd be dead by the end of the average PMP review.
exactly. So that, yeah, that's what it is more tonal variation. I will jump on your bandwagon.
Well, glad we're selling you on it.
Yeah.
All right. But great accomplishment, Ryan. We're happy that you got this whole thing in, and congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
You know,
Next
that's a real rewarding accomplishment for these guys. We've had a couple of announcements of finally got there with an Army project this month, and we've also had a few announcements of this is my first submission here this month as well. So that's my way of transitioning into Bento San's piece here, because this is his first sharing with us as well. So here's his. He says he's using this as a D&D character, and this is his dwarf hero that he's tried to do some. He's tried to stretch it out a little bit and do more variation and forced highlights and shading in his metallics, as well as on the hair. So those are the couple of things that he pointed out that he wanted to talk about. So let's start with dwarf hair, because it's a really important part of a dwarf. Let's be honest. And I think what you've got here is you've certainly achieved some deep contrast. And for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it, because you come to a sort of a very bright orange on a couple of places, and then keep it real deep brown and almost black in the deeper recesses. The only thing that I would say about the placement of that is I think that under the mustache, that's appropriate. That amount of darkness under there feels right to me. On the sides, though, next to the cheekbones and underneath the cheeks, I think that stayed a little bit darker than it should have. So if you were to take a few minutes to go back at this, Bento, that's what I would say, is I think that you can go back and build a little bit more color in there and shrink that shade space beneath the cheekbones. That's the only critique I would have about that part of the hair. Let's scroll through a couple other shots for folks as well. And talk about a couple other aspects of it.
Oh, did Kieran go robot?
Rarely monochrome. Dark through it is really good. But much like the same, instead of it being an absolute band where one color ends and the other begins, a little bit of overlap. You can do this on a fur texture with a little bit of a dry brushing, in truth, and lighter color, but selectively, right? Probably brush the whole black with that light tan color, but you're going to pick out overlapping towards the center and left. But there still might be a couple of tiny touches, especially on the top crest of his shoulders, where that sort of light tan color sell the realism more. Next thing that I want is your talent. What you did want to do a little bit of an idea on the hammer, and good. Like you've tones that are going into the metallics there. You've sort of reversed the signal as metallics tend to do. So what I mean by that is when light strikes and reflects and bounces, placement of it kind of full surface. So on this one, though, the only tiny thing that seems out of place is that when we look at the front side, is that top spike. I think that the light would accumulate just down the line in the center. It would be actually darker on top where the light doesn't immediately reflect, but it kind of diffuses around the spike. So it'll settle at the bottom rather than at the very top. the spec. That's my only complaint about your placement there, I think. Otherwise, on the armor, I think that you've put some good interest and you've put some good shading in a number of those spots. What I'd like to look at, do we have a shot of the shield side? Did he give us one?
Yep. I don't know if you were coming through for everybody else normally. For me, it was you were a little choppy there, but
Oh, we're having that a little bit.
that's okay. You're very clear now.
Yeah, on this one, I think that you can reinforce a little bit more darks on this shield because the shield is in fact facing a little bit to the floor from the angle that he's holding it. So there will be some deeper shade in here. So if you do want to spend a couple minutes to go back at it, right beneath the crest on that circular part, I think that it would be a little bit darker and it wouldn't get light again until it sort of curls around the bottom side of that circular banding that's on the center of the shield. So that's, again, just a little tip about light placement that might help you out a little bit. I think the final thing that I want to say is spinning back around to the front side. You've managed to do a good expressive face on a dwarf where there's not much face to work with. I did notice that you put a little bit of scarring under his eye to make him look a little bit more battle worn, and that always adds a good bit of flavor into a dwarf model. And then just so that Vince doesn't have to say it, let's get another texture on that base is the final thing that I'm going to say about this. You've done some interesting rock shaping on there, but it either needs to get, if it is just stone and stone alone, and it's outdoors, then it'll have some greens in there and it'll have some other muddy kind of colors, maybe even some yellows a little bit. And you can use some washing and staining to get that happening. But otherwise, if you want to put a couple spots of foliage or, a cavern mushroom or two on there, I think those would be some interesting bits to add on. And yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. Dallas,
Awesome.
or Vince, you got anything to add?
Nothing else from me, man. All right.
Dandy.
Steve Wallace. Eric, what do we got for him?
Well, Eric has fallen off the side of the earth.
Oh, Eric fell off the side of the earth. I didn't see that. I can't see you guys, obviously. Okay.
Okay, so let's see what we can see about this.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll tell you what, we got 3 left. We can just kind of round robin the last 3. How about that? If Eric comes back, he can pick them up.
Okay.
So in this one, he said his little guys, he picked up some old school familiars out of sense of nostalgia. They're resin, and he does not like resin. They're fragile, and they broke up and stuff like that. He says he wants to look at he's trying to comprehensively explore color, painting techniques, and basing. And basically he's trying a bunch of sort of advanced techniques and seeing how things work out. All right. So let's take a look.
Things to experiment on, although the surface area is tiny on a lot of these things. For those watching at home, you have to understand that these little familiars are, in fact, the size of your thumbnail.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the normal little branch piece off of the off of the tree lord. And look how big it is compared to Mr. Pumpkin there.
Yeah, that's right.
So these guys are very, very small. Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say. I dig these old familiars. Some of this stuff you're doing some really fun stuff here. Okay. And I think in a lot of places you're achieving some really interesting effects. So I'll kind of move through and just talk about a couple things I quite like. I like the freehand on the book. I think that looks nice here in the printing. I think that looks really good, Mr. Foot book guy. A lot of your blending looks really good. Things like this, the stone here on the wall, you added a little bit of, the texture and you caught the light really nice here on the wall where the candle's showing and stuff like that. But I will say that off the top of my head, tiny figures are terrible to push yourself on. What I mean by that is they're so small, it seems like it's an advantage. It's like, oh, I could paint them quicker and experiment with stuff. The problem is they're so small, it just, the detail doesn't read, right? And you almost kill yourself trying to do some of these advanced techniques. What I would recommend is to go grab yourself just like some bones figures or a pack of, you know, cheaper models from like Osprey or something like that, or whatever, and experiment on something actually larger. Larger is generally better for experimentation. When it comes to things like a non-metallic sword like this guy actually has a pretty big oversized sword. Like, you've got the right idea here. You need to push the contrast a little more, sharpen up the edge highlights a little more, but that's tough on this like soft resin. So like your white should come, this should come basically all the way to white right here. And this should come all the way to basically near black right here, right? That kind of stuff. But your colors look really good. Like, you've got a nice bluish sort of steel transition here. So I think if you experiment on figures that are a little bigger and a little smoother, you will probably have better results because you'll have more space to play around with. Like, when it comes to stuff like this guy and his bone, you know, I'd say, well, you want to create more separation between the bones, like his teeth and his ribs, his arms and his tail. You want more separation in there. The problem is, I know the delta in between here is so tiny that you'd have to work with like this, you know, mega, you know, triple aught brush to get like the color really down in there properly. Or if you wash it, then to re-highlight the ribs, you know, and that's just not going to be a fun process. So if you paint on something bigger, you can experiment with these techniques. And then the better you are with them, the easier it becomes to shrink them. Like, if you think about it, is it, you know, like, think about how much easier it is to work at a normal size than to work small, right? If I told you, like, draw a, you know, a house, and you had like a full A4 sheet of paper to do it on, you could probably draw a house. If I said, you know, draw a house on, you know, on a full-size house on the something the size of your fingernail, you can't work to the same detail level, right? So it lets you experiment with these techniques more freely when you go slightly larger. Thoughts?
But when you have, I guess, from what I gather from Steve's attitude about this, is these were going to kind of be throwaway models because of the material. So,
yep.
You know, can't fault you for putting it in on these guys, trying a few things out.
Yeah, I always found that trying to push myself on models that I don't like is really, really difficult because you don't really want to paint them in the first place. So if you want to push yourself on something, find a model that you really, really like and paint that. And like Vince was saying, paint something bigger. Go paint a bust or 75 mil figure or something that gives you some room to work and to play around with it.
Yeah, or go grab some like Nolzur's Marvelous Miniature Ogres or some Reaper Bones Ogres, or, you know, something that size, like an ogre, a troll, right? So there's still, even if you want to stay in the 28 mil range, that's cool. Just get a bigger guy, right? Get something like a size of an ogre. Again, you've got more flesh to play with, more steel, weapons are bigger, arms are bigger, faces are bigger, right? So it gives you more space to play around with. Find one you think looks really cool and that you think would be fun to paint. Because there's a huge selection in all those ranges.
And I'll tell you right now, Vince, if anyone can attest to painting stuff on 40 mil bases and bigger, it's this guy.
All right.
For all you guys watching at home, the inside joke there is Dallas is a troll lover, and
I
probably would be in real life if he ever bumped into one.
Nothing wrong with that. Trolls were always some of the best figs around. So, okay, we got two more here. We got Chand and Nicholas, and then we're going to take our break here. So we'll kind of talk about these together. Chand is really looking for feedback on the non-metallic metal and improvement on it. So this is your classic Emperor's Champion model. So let's talk about NMM. Remember earlier when we talked about contrast? Hey-oh!
Yeah.
Okay. So first things first, I actually think the non-metallic metal is the strongest part of this Chand. I would push up a few highlights a little more. We need some white light catches here at the base of his arm where light would be tumbling down. So here and here, we need a light catch. Here on the corner of his head, I need a stronger pure white light catch. Here on the tip of the knee, here on the tip of the leg. Probably here actually up by this edge highlight would be correct because it hits straight on. So it's It's going to pop off there. This comes to the right brightness right here on the shoulder pad. This is like, and if you look, this is one of the most striking elements of the thing. Like, if you just kind of relax your eye, you always notice this because you went to the pure white here. The sword looks really nice. I would push a few of these highlights a little higher. You got it here. I would match this with this. Like, that is to say, make this up here as bright as this. Where I actually think, for my money, I want to see a little more like something a little cleaner is down here in the cloak. This is actually the part that lets me down, because this looks a little too dirty. It gets a little too dark. I assume this is meant to be a white or near white tabard, like, you know, cream colored, whatever. But it actually looks really dirty. Like, it looks like we've got mud trapped in there because it's so dark. And I don't think the Emperor's Champion is walking around with his muddy tabard. So, like, smooth that out. Maybe use a purple, like a very desaturated purple to shade it. Something like a black leather from scale 75, or an African shadow, or purple 5 from War Colors, or I don't know, anything like that. Maybe a little hex lichen from Vallejo mixed with a little rust color. And very lightly glaze that in to get your shadow, and then put some white over top of it. But overall, this is really good work.
For the sake of bringing a little bit of purple away from the sword and giving it some balance, even though it's not, that tabard is not going to read as purple, the brain will still pick up that it's a mild bit purple and counterbalance.
Yep. We could work some violet rust down into the rusty base too. That could be another way to sneak some purple in here, right? Like, violet rust is perfectly valid. It's sort of a deep red, old rust color. So you can always sneak that in too. Rust can be so many different colors. It's a very fun thing to play with. Dallas, what about yourself? Any thoughts you want to add on Shan's Emperor's Champion?
No, I think you guys covered everything. It's like you said, it's got a lot of contrast, which is the key to non-metal metal. The one thing he might want to try, if he wants to go to the next level, is start incorporating tones of the non-metal areas, like they said, like the tabard and everything, into his metal just a little bit to show it reflecting that material's color.
Yep.
But
so a dirty non-metallic reflection, right? Where it's the light is getting polluted by the colors in the atmosphere, basically.
Absolutely. Yep. That's
something else I want to talk about here is the carving that's in the sword. How do we deal with this? Like, I guess what I'm saying is, I feel like there should still be a little bit more purple that reflects on that flattened surface of the sword, both front and back.
Mm-hmm.
But with that carving of the Imperator Rex in there, you have a whole bunch of different facets that are kind of going in different directions. So how do you think you guys would play that out? Would you do a sweep of some of that violet across the flat surface and modulate it in a similar way? Or would you put a little bit of the purple instead of his highlight white reflection, or build it into that of each different character that's carved into it? What do you think?
I'll let Dallas go first. Dallas, what do you think?
I get to go first.
Indeed.
I think that I would highlight every single symbol as its own item on the sword, so that all, like you said, have their own reflections based on your light source. So every single one would have the highlight and the shadows as the one above or below it, and then like you said, where the white crosses over, those ones you'd take up to the next level, but it still has to be the same based on where you're creating your light sources for your non-metal metal.
Yeah, you're saying have them vary some, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you still have to do them all to the same level. Like, he has a couple that don't have any highlights whatsoever on the backside here.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all going to have the sharp edges. They're all going to reflect light to some level.
Yeah, I think for me, like, it's really tough. I would honestly take the reflections into a little bit of purple white and I would have them go white in a corner as though it's like a light catch, and I would have the light be cascading more directionally. Make sure that you're only highlighting like one side of the letter in each case, right? So they pop that 3-dimensional element. And it looks like he did that some. It's really hard to tell. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I feel bad for Chan because I hate lettering like this on swords. It's so annoying to actually do. But like, because you need that will also, it looks like our white got a little chalky in some places where he was trying to get so thin and so precise. So like by reducing it and making it more of a purple white, it will actually keep it much more smooth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good thoughts, fellas.
All right. So last but certainly not least, before our intermission here, Nicholas says his first posting, his latest Legion of the Brush competition here in Denver. Likes the way his cloak turned out, but the fur seems a little flat. And also his first time doing some NMM. All right. Boy, it's an NMM month over here.
Isn't it?
Okay.
So
So I'll talk quickly about the fur as it's, this is something Kieran touched on earlier. Think about variation in your fur. So let's like take this here. What I would do is we can do this through some inks and washes and stuff like that. Let's put a black stripe here, white-ish right next to it on each side, and then brown. Okay. Now that doesn't mean all brown. Brown stops, white begins, all white, white stops, black begins, black stops, white, you get what I mean? No, we want to like dry brush this up or grab the individual fur things if you want to paint it slowly, but a dry brush is fine. And then we put some black wash, and then we over white some of this, we dry this heavier, and we do some brown washing, and we bring the brown into the white, and the white dry brush goes down into the black. You know what I'm saying? So we go back and forth. Let me see you go back, and forth, just over and over again.
No, you didn't.
I did. I certainly did. So, the point is you want those to mix up, right? So it looks like when you get to the dead center of it, you have mostly black with just some light gray light catches on it. But as it moves out, it starts to become more and more white. That's just a sample. I've used that example a couple of times, but you could go anywhere with it, right? It could go black to brown to gray, or black to gray to brown with a couple white patches around. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like fur is fur. It's a natural creature. It has some randomly organic pattern. The point is that by doing that, that's what'll make it more interesting and pop that out. The other thing I would say on the cloak is I do agree your red is very smooth, but when you have recesses like this in the cloak, you do want to put some kind of shade in there. Like get those things darker so it actually looks like it's, it has a place there.
I actually want a whole separate color in there if it's my liking.
Yeah, sure.
Within that sort of, I know I'm using the word carving, but that's not what I mean. But it's sculpted into the cloak, so I think that you do a different color within that.
Yep, and it could be as simple as like he runs a dark purple in there or something, right?
Yeah. I like the idea of doing gold, actually, gold or yellow.
Sure, something high contrast.
I was just gonna say that's the biggest thing on this model again is just the contrast aspect. If you added a little bit of one extra layer to everything, whether it's going up or going down, this model would escalate hugely. I mean, it looks awesome, but that is the one thing that would really make this model pop, especially like Vince was saying on the cloak and on the fur. Just finding ways to add some tonal variations into it.
There you go.
It's amazing what that little bit of tonal variation or contrast can do to a model.
Agreed.
I want to finish up by saying that this gold reads really well, though. Like the gold on this guy's Crozius, and even he's got some kind of skull wings on his belt down there. That stuff, I think, to me, reads really well on this model. So that's a good triumph.
All right. Yeah, I feel like we could use a little more white. Maybe the edges traced of the individual thing, right? Like the inner edge, like a light catch along the edge, or push to a little more yellow white near the bottom. Again, I feel like, or deeper browns the top. I think we still have a situation where we need to up that variation across it. But I think like the base color is a really nice ochre. He's got the he's definitely has the right, base elements here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to take a short little break. So intermission for us. We're gonna go out. We're gonna grab ourselves a coffee, take a shower, change our clothes, randomly, like we do in the middle of these, and we'll be back in just a moment. So see you in a minute. All right, we're back. So ready to keep going. We've all got our coffee. We shaved or didn't. I don't know. Depends on where you're at. Like I don't remember where
I grew
my
a lot of hair in the last 10 minutes, actually.
yeah,
Check this.
nice. Nice. Looking good, man. I like it. So we're going to get right back into it. So let me share up here. And we're going to start off with Lloyd Hiller, who's 5th mini painted. And Eric is going to take us through it. He did a little Space Marine here.
Yeah. No, this guy is really great. And there's a lot of good things to say about this miniature. I think first of all, you can see in that face how much depth there is in the skin tones and how clean and thin layered this guy was painted, and just really great ability to kind of get the breadth of color into this guy, give him that I don't know, yeah, just a very lifelike. The skin tone is darker, which is also can be harder to work with. Yeah, I think you did. That's the first place you look. You look through the rest of the armor, you see just really clean, blocking, and then really clean line highlighting around edge highlighting and line highlighting on the pauldrons, etc. Where I typically go when it comes to the blue Space Marines, I think blue is one of those colors that blends so easily. You can go from different types of blues into purples into greenish blues and stuff, and it all just kind of works together. It seems like blue is almost bulletproof when it comes to blending and tone and shade, etc. And so often when I'm seeing blue, I want to see more use of that. So I would love to see some more tones of blue mixed in with this color, and that those are used in places like under the armpits, under the pauldrons, the underside of things going up. Now, I definitely get this is a particular style of the heavy metal style, and getting everything super clean, and so I get that. One thing I would say, whereas the blue you have here, it looks like you've black lined it, but you've not washed it, which is just fine for the style you're going for. However, the guns, the coloring on the guns, the red on the guns, feels like those did get washed, and they're a little bit kind of, I don't know if splotchy is the term, dirtier is the term, maybe. And if that's what you're going for, I would say there's seems like a little bit of contrast between the dirtiness of the guns and the body armor itself. And so that may be something that you want to look at, is is it that the guns just need to be cleaned up so that they're as crisp as the guy's armor, or does the armor need to get some more dirtiness to it? The only other thing I think I would mention, again, if we flip to, let's go to the next image. I don't know if it's the second or third image. I want to look at let's go one more. Here. What can be tough, and I think this is probably a decal, so I don't know if there's more to do with it, but bright red on bright blue always have, obviously they're kind of, I don't know what the term is. There's a lot of dissonance there for me between those, when those two colors are next to each other. They're not high enough contrast to where, where they, you can see either one really well. And so one of the things I would suggest if you're doing more decals is I'd maybe do an undercoat where the decal is going to be of a darker blue, or maybe a dark, well, again, I don't think that's going to work to do a darker red underneath that whole thing, but maybe if you can do a darker blue in the middle where that's going to go, the red markings around the skull on the decal would pop a bit more. As of right now, that red and blue just clash. Other than that, the basing is fairly simple and clean, and that's great. I can see the bottom of that little, man, my language is poor tonight. The tuft, I can see the bottom of the tuft kind of peeking up. So, make sure that's glued down. And what you may want to do is glue the tuft down and then maybe use some of that same Agrellan earth and kind of put that on around that, over top of that edge kind of thing, and let the grass kind of blend in as if it's popping out from between the cracks, etc. Other than that, obviously, just a real mastery of the line highlightings and of your edge highlights, and you've done an amazingly clean job. I just bring it in line in terms of the guns are grittier, and the body armor is super clean. So I would find the consistency there. And then if you're looking to do any more, blues are great for getting into blending and doing some more of that. So the nice thing, this is your 5th model as you're kind of progressing. The other nice thing about blue is that they all, they can blend together. So if you start working on some blends and etc., you'll get the hang of it by your 10th model, and you'll be loving the blends. So those would be my points.
In closing, I want to say, being that this is Lloyd's 5th model, when you say by the time he reaches his 10th model, he'll be edition painting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it is. I agree with everything you said, but I also do want to add, like, holy Moses for your 5th model, man.
Yeah.
I mean, geez. Like, seriously. Wow. Well done. Well done, buddy. All right.
Which is also, I have no problem saying go for the blending, because
right, yeah, exactly. He's clearly proven like that he is a master of the basics 5 models in, no doubt about it.
Yep.
I completely agree. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody attack and master the basics so efficiently and quickly, to be honest. Okay. All right. Next up, Surface Tension, who's bringing us a nice little Frazetta inspired diorama.
Ralph Wiggum would be so proud.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Well, let's lay down what Surface Tension had asked us here, and I feel like we're on a first name basis, so I'm going to call you Surface,
Mr. Surface. Yes.
So Surface. Yes. To lay background for those of you watching at home, what he wanted to do is recreate a piece of art in the Franz Frazetta style of the 1980s. And in fact, he included it right at the end, I think, if you want to flip to that first.
Yep.
Yeah, so this was his inspiration, right? And obviously he's brought that into the AOS world using the figures that are there. So that looks great. So let's flip back to the beginning again. What he made mention of in his comments that he wanted some feedback about is he let us know that, first off, he did this almost entirely with oils. So great experimenting with that. And also was sort of stretching it out with non-metallic metals, which is on a few spot places here. Like you see, the metallic is on mostly just accessories and those kinds of like strap-on small armor greaves and things like that, and which we'll see when we get into the individual models. But before we do that, the first thing I want to give him a compliment on, as far as when we're looking at this whole diorama display, is very cool background. It's just a very impressionist kind of color that lays a contrasting cast upon the action that's going on in front. With orange and pink, you can sometimes get into a little bit of a danger zone, but that is a very sort of subdued pink that goes on there, and it doesn't detract from it too much. It just gives us a nice background. The way that he's handled doing the crusty snow here, especially around the front edge of his framework, as a guy who spends a lot of time in snow, probably 7 months of my year, I applaud you. You've hit this pretty well, and the tracking that you've done. I kind of wish that we could see an overhead of that and how you've done the depth into the snow and those kinds of things. But I can detect that there's some efforts in there, and I think that part reads pretty well. If you were to do anything different with the groundworks and the diorama display, well, you have a couple bursts of flame there that are up near the front, and then you have on your painted background a whole wall of flame. But therefore, that would impress on me that even if this snow was hard crusted ice that had been there for months, that would melt away super quick, right? And so we'd have a different coloration of the snow right around where that fire is, and probably even some exposed burnt grass or whatever other bracken and foliage is underneath this snow. That would be exposed pretty quickly. So that's my only thought about the diorama composition wise that I think I throw it at you, Surface. But let's look at some of the individual shots, starting with his Griffhounds, which which I had a giggle. Dave Robertson in the comments of this thing referred to them as the tiger chickens.
Feels right.
Appropriately named. So what I appreciate about this, when we look at the way that the tiger fur is done, is you have a real nice soft blend where you're transitioning orange to white. And that is really capturing the essence of the tiger. The other thing that I really appreciate that you've done is you haven't defaulted to doing black stripes on this, which a lot of people, when they first visually look at a tiger, think, well, that's an orange and a black thing. Those are black stripes, but they're truly not. And you've paid attention to make sure that you just represented them as a very deep umber brown. And the fuzzing that you've done on it really sells the idea that it's a textured coat that's, standing on end, because these guys are in action battle, so they're not in their, sort of relaxed pet me fur kind of mode. I also appreciate that you did a bit of extra texturing on the feathers up around the neck area too, so that reads real well. But let's look at a couple other snapshots of the other tiger chickens that he's got here. Yeah, actually pause on this one for a second, because this is where we'll sort of transition to talk about the metallic that he's done here. So he's got that spike around the collar that's strapped onto there, and just a couple other accents that are done in the non-metallic style. Technique is wonderful, Surface. The way that you've done that. There's maybe a couple other spots where you might have gone to the purest white to capture some light catches. But overall, the softness of the way that you've gone from contrast of absolute black to absolute white is handled really great. I don't have any critique about the technique on that. But when we get to the Marauder, I'll have another thought to circle back to. So let's go ahead to the Marauder now, if you could, Vince. All righty. So with this guy, still talking about the metallics. There's actually a shot from the other side of it that might help us illustrate this a little bit better. You can flip around. Yeah, pause on this one here for a second. Okay, so what I want to say is that when light beams down, what I have learned, because I have been struggling with this a lot lately, guys, on understanding where reflection goes and where the light strikes and rebounds and where all this should be painted. So here's what I've learned. What I've learned is that unlike most other things that we highlight, metallic has its brightest points further down the surface from where the actual top of it highlights. And I want to have everybody focus, first of all, on the cuff that's on the back leg of this horse. All right, so there's a metallic cuff that goes around that back leg. This is absolutely correct. How the light catches on the bottom side of that and reflects. Okay. And then he's done that similarly in a couple other spots, but where I feel that it's done incorrectly is that underneath the bridle, there is sort of a big, chaos arrow going forward there. And he's highlighted the top of that and those two dags on the top of the bridle as well. Okay, and I just feel like it would be, if it's a curved surface, it would be right at the crest of the curve where that highlight catches. But if it's a flat surface, it would be towards the bottom of that arrow that's right before his knee, where that would reflect the most. So those are only a couple of offerings that I have learned along the way, because I've made these mistakes as far as the realism of reflected light. And the way that relates to your axe head on top of this is that you can probably just get away with like 2 sort of cones of widening highlight as you get away from the actual axe blade and get towards that. Oh, there's probably a technical word for where the axe is at an angle and then it comes out to its flat surface, its flat head that follows the line of the axe face. I hope the people at home know what I'm talking about. Maybe you guys can help me out.
I have no idea, but I know what you mean, but nope.
Yeah. So anyway, not quite at the axe blade, not where it touches the blood of the enemies, but that second curve that's like a few inches away from it. That thing. That's the thing I want to touch on. So I want to spruik once again whenever I have had struggles about how metal reflects, and especially when it's different shaped surfaces that have different facings. I always go back to a nice demonstrative video by a guy who calls himself Cujo Painting. And go reference that because he just actually lays it out really nicely to understand how light should reflect on things and how it bounces off of other things. So try that out for metallic stuff. Now, one last thing before we close is I want to finish off. If we can do 2 frames back, and let's look at this Marauder in a fleshy perspective. This I love. I think that I really appreciate how you have incorporated a lot of different color within this guy's flesh. He's not a very expressive guy because he's got a dour look on his face, but the shape of his face and the cragginess of it and the wornness, the worn idea is really captured here. This guy's lived his life out in the wastes. I mean, he's topless in, foot deep snow for God's sakes. So by having reds and blues incorporated into the flesh, I really want to commend you for doing that blend and giving this guy a lot more character that way. So yes, those are my thoughts. I hope you can take a couple things away from that surface if you're endeavoring to do more dioramas later.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And awesome experimentation on the oils. I mean, like, a lot of it looks really, really nice. And by a lot of it, I mean, it looks really, really nice.
Yeah, it works smooth, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Scott Palmer with his second bust, and he wanted to texture in the skin, but he's not sure he hasn't pushed it too far. Okay. Let's see. He said, and also he'd like some thoughts on the plinth. Yeah, picking like bust to plinth size has a pretty strict ratio. You can look it up. There's a couple people who've posted like the way that the ratio works. By the way, I think this one's fine. I think it's exactly the right size. Like there's a sort of, it's not an exact thing like, 1.7 to 1 or something, although that probably is close. But it's because that's sort of the golden ratio for most things in the world. But it's, generally you want it to be, the bust to be slightly taller. I guess that's the easy way to say it. Okay, so let's talk about this lady, which I've seen several people paint this girl up. I think I don't know if she's a recent sculptor, just a bunch of people all came, discovered her simultaneously. So texture, or there's a couple things I want to touch on. When we're doing busts, it's really all about detail, like, and taking everything to its utter extreme. So with that in mind, the part of this that I really, really love is the eel. I think you actually did a great job with the eel. I don't think the skin texture is too much. I think it looks actually pretty wonderful. I I might have pushed the eel a little more into the yellow spectrum to make him pop a little more. You clearly offset him by making him this more yellow-green, whereas she's the blue-green. So I like that. I might have taken that just a tad farther, especially on the brighter spots. So maybe like up here and right here, really pushed him into that yellow spectrum. Maybe a little bit along here as well. Just some, because like part of the problem is I understand this is the shadowed part of the eel, but he's almost too universally shadowed in here. Like one would think some amount of light would fall down in this area. Like you highlighted her finger here to some degree. So this feels like it should be brighter as well and catching some of that yellow light. Just to show like a consistency of color, if nothing else. So maybe a little more eel contrast is what I'm saying. The other thing I would say is when we get to female busts, never miss an opportunity to accentuate the elements of the face. Now, I'm assuming underwater eel lady isn't wearing heavy makeup. Okay, so that's fine. But that doesn't mean she couldn't have, like, her lips should be some color other than just a slightly darker version of her skin. You know, like they would honestly look wonderful in a muted, like dark purple, like what you've got down here in the lower parts of the hair. It would just, I mean, it would really pop the face. You would be amazed at the difference if you took that purple and brought it down here to her lips. Again, it's a fairly desaturated color. It's dark. It doesn't look like lipstick. It could just be the natural color of her lips. Same with working a little bit of that above the eye here and here. Not eyeshadow style, more just natural eye coloration. People's eyes have a lot of red. Like if this eel lady has blood in her of some kind, it would show, and coloration and sort of will tend to collect around the eye here. Purples is an easy grab, especially if it's into this crimson type color. So you could use something like that. And that's basically what I'd say. Basically, like my main piece of feedback would be we need more color variation in the skin. And you could play with different tones here. I understand you want to keep the eel yellow, but bringing in some pinks or some purples, you could even bring in blue. You could do an interesting swap where instead of her having blush cheeks instead of her cheeks blushing red, her cheeks could blush blue. It would actually be nice because you've got these scales down here in the sort of teal, turquoise, blue spectrum. Bring some of that up here. Have her have some part above her eyes or in her cheeks or in her elbow turn into the blue spectrum. Bring some of that down here into the nape of her neck, right? As though she's blue-blooded. I don't mean she's a noble or something. I just mean that, like, you know, she's an underwater cold-blooded creature or something, perhaps. So who knows? And that will add some additional pop there, right? Alternatively, you could take and push into like a really light pink, not the deep red that we would normally see, but maybe like an almost iridescent pink, like a rose color. Either way, that variation on the skin is what you really want to do to get that popped out there, to really show, because you don't have a lot of detail here. What I mean by that is, I don't mean you, I mean like this bust, it does not have a lot of detail. It's not overrun with, you know, bejangles and things to paint to create differentiation and visual interest. So we have to add it, right? And we do that through color and volume. So that would be my recommendation. All in all, though, I think your composition is really strong here. You have a really nice, clear vision. She feels very much like an underwater creature. Your color choices are all excellent. And I like the way you've chosen to highlight the hair. I want to end on that. I actually quite like how you've done the hair. You could pick out a few more little strands, maybe up here on this side with some additional light, like right in here. But for the most part, the hair looks really, really nice. So yeah, great job. The eyes look nice as well. I like the directionality you gave the eyes of her looking up toward the surface world. I think that was a good choice. All right.
And the eel looks like an actual pet instead of just like a horrible monster that's going to bite your fingers.
Oh yeah, totally. Okay, so Vlad brings us Alariel. Let's see. So we've got Alariel. We've got this wonderful. We've got Emil, who's sharing his first post with us, with this Space Marine dude here. I don't remember what this guy's name is. I have this guy waiting to be painted. I really like this figure. I think he's cool. And Fulcrum with a X-Wing repaint. So let's see. Eric, would you like to take Alariel? And then Kieran, if you want the Space Marine, I'm going to say Chaplain, but I don't know. This guy. And then, yeah. And I would love to take this repaint if that's okay with you, gentlemen.
Yep.
So, all right. Alariel.
All right. Let's push through a few of these, shots a little bit. All right. So I love the tone that you're going for. I like the earthiness, and I think you're definitely going a different direction, not having a lot of greens, and kind of especially saturated greens, etc. So I commend you on going kind of maybe a fall color or autumn scheme, which is really cool. The few things that are really good I like too in terms of what you've blocked for color. You've got the ground, which has got some greens, but starting to maybe that's turning into some oranges and purples in the autumn. The beetle is a very kind of earthy brown. The Alariel has a lot more whites and blues, and then the wings are much more of a kind of a light brown or orange, desaturated orange, etc. So I think you're blocking. You've got some good differentiation in that. But what I would say that stands out the most is how bright Alariel is in the composition. And this could be photography. And so if you have an opportunity to take her someplace that's maybe has some very consistent and indirect lighting and get a good photo, that could help. So it could be photography. But I would say at the moment, she feels like she's very bright in the midst of this, and it certainly draws your eye to her. But it feels a little bit strong for me. And so some ways that you could, I don't think that there's a problem having a blue in the mix of this earthiness, and that would also draw the eye quite a bit without maybe it being so bright in the middle of it. And that blue could be something that's more subdued or gets into a desaturated blue, and that blue could work itself into some of the leaves and vines, etc. But right now it's kind of like a really bright kind of blue-white. Can we go back one more spot and get close up on her? Maybe one more. Nope. More. Here we go. And so you've got a lot of, and maybe some of it is, and I think standalone, she's looking really, really good. I mean, I feel like there's some really good, consistent, good blocking, really clean. Your work on the kind of decoration on her helm. I really like kind of this seafoam green color on the on her helmet, etc. But everything in this main body just goes to a very bright white. So I would say either, let's go either direction. Either I think you darken her up a little bit more in some key places, keep her bright near her face, but maybe take her feet closer to earth tones, or darken that up, that the blue gets a little desaturated and goes darker, so that it starts blending in more in the overall tones. Or if you're planning on taking a lot more of the other elements up brighter, so the feathers on the wings, are they going brighter, etc. And there's some really cool artists on the channel that do a lot of high contrast highlighting, and so your dark base definitely gives you room to go towards that if that's what you were interested in doing. Let me look at this real quick. I'm going to I just want to see if there's a thing I'm missing. Yeah, that's what I would say. Is I think it feels like you've just got a lot of brightness in the middle here. I suppose the other option would be to take the wings and where they meet her, that they're brighter there, and then they get darker towards the ends. So you get maybe some sense that she's emanating some sort of glow. And then on the beetle itself, where she's standing, you get some similar effect there, that the top of the beetle and the vines that she's standing on are kind of almost taking on some of that lightness as well. So those would be my thoughts. I think I like the color choices going into these earthier tones and autumn, etc. I think Alarial feels a little bit more like winter in this mix, which maybe it could be cool too if you were able to take the base and have some kind of snow starting. So maybe she's moving from autumn into winter herself. But yeah, those are my thoughts. If anybody else has any other thoughts on how to tame that brightness.
No, I think that's all good ideas.
Yeah, that's a cool take on it too. It's sell the idea that she's magical and emanating. I dig it.
Yep. All right. Next up, we have our, again, let's say chaplain.
All right. Man, I wonder how many people are upset at the fact that our 40K knowledge is the deepest of any trio ever.
We don't need to know exactly what it is to evaluate its paint quality or to give advice, as that's what I say.
Let's remember that.
I'll know once I paint this guy. How about that? Then I'll be like, oh, it was this thing the whole time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this. All right, so Emil here has done a pretty impressive piece of work, but the comments that he wanted us to touch on again are the no metal. So I'm going to talk about that a lot this month, and a few other things like the robes. So here we go. Let's talk about the non-metal. So I think that your light placement is pretty good here. If we scan around and look at a few shots, again, picking up on what I had said on the previous one and what I've learned, is it's not always right at the zenith point where the light strikes that the light reflects from. So coming down the curvature of the shoulder blades, having a bright light catch of reflection at the bottom of these sort of coronas and all the whatever those things happen to be that are framing the skulls. I think that you've paid good attention to that, and those feel like they're placed correctly. Let's spin through a couple of shots if we could and show people the side views of these as well. Because I think the thing to work on for the non-metal mill is not the placement, but it's the blending. It can certainly go harshly from dark to light when you have an abrupt surface change, right? So, for instance, the crest of that shoulder blade, where it kind of has a bit of an undercut, immediately goes from super bright in your sort of yellow color that you've used there to a deep brown just underneath it, and that's fine. But at the corners of it, there should be a little softer transition between all those things. So you got a few potential approaches here. The simplest might be to just choose your mid-tone of what you're using for this gold. So it'd probably be like a pale brown or whatever color it is that you got as the mid-tone here. And get yourself some glaze medium and see if you can just do a few soft glazes over there to try to stretch that and blend it in a little bit. But then you'll have to come back afterwards for, again, with glaze medium, you use your highlight color of this brightest yellow and reinforce that again just a little bit for your sharp light catch points. Alternately, you can become a student of Ben Kometz. There's another great painter who's fantastic at the loaded brush technique, which is not for the faint of heart. He makes it look that way, but it takes a bit of work to do it. But he's been tremendous with that, with doing, you know, blend transitions on not just non-metallics, but most of the stuff that he does. So those are two approaches that you could do. I would, speaking of the cloak, now that we're looking at the back of it, I think I'd say the similar thing to that. I think that you just need to do that blend smoother, choose a mid-tone color that you can sort of glaze over top, so that it's going to both bring your dark a little bit lighter and bring your light a little bit darker, and have some transition period between the two of them. And using glaze medium is the best way that I've come together to do that sort of thing. So I think that's what I'd recommend here, Emil, in both of those circumstances. A couple other quick things to talk about while we're looking at this particular frame, actually, is I want to compliment you on the realism of this base. I like everything about this base. That you've got green in there. You've got a little bit of, you know, lichen blue and this exposed oxidized red, which you've carried over onto the boots and cloak of this guy. So Vince, if you could flip us back to a front side shot to finish that thought, because he's added some extra there. By virtue of the dusting that's come up onto the bottom of his cloak and that oxidation, I feel like the top surface of the rock could actually, you know, lend to that as well. You could maybe have a little bit more of that oxidized business on the top surface. To sell that out, but that's a small thing. I think that you've given us the idea that he lives in the environment that he's in, and that's all good with me. But the one last thing that I want to close out here is we have a lot of bones and ribbons and ivory cloak going on in the front of this guy, and those are all three very different tactile surfaces. I guess the fourth tactile surface that we have is the wings of his Crozius that you've also chosen to do in bone color. So what I would suggest is that to leave all four of these things in a slightly different end color tone instead of doing them all as similarly as you have. In other words, those old skulls that he's using as decor could be a little bit more brown. The wings could be maybe a cold white instead of a warm white. And that would play off actually against the blue of the bolter casing that you got. So instead of using browns and ivories over there, you would use sort of blue grays into white on the Crozius. That's another option. And maybe you do that approach on the inside of his cloak as well. But with the whole purpose, Emil, of just kind of creating a separation of, let's allow you to tell from a distance away what all these different textures are. That's sort of where my thoughts are coming from on that. Okay. In closing, though, wonderful paint application and composition of this. Your steel metallic looks good to me. Again, you're unlike what we talked about in the last piece. I think your placing of all the highlights and where they should be is pretty nailed. You know, you're going into an advanced level of soft blends to sell the full idea of that non-metal. So that's what I would say about that.
Right on. Yeah, it's a great figure. It's really a good figure for all that kind of experimentation, right? Because of the surfaces are just so varied. You got all these different types of metals to play with, weird shapes. It's it'll take you through the paces, that's for sure. All right. So Fulcrum brings us a repaint. This is a popular thing within the X-Wing genre, right? Because most of these come as already painted. And so he brings us basically, you know, but people will buy them and then repaint them to actually give them more, you know, of a, I don't know if you want to call it a realistic paint job or let's say a better paint job than, you know, sort of what they look like out of the box. So he talks about the tiny geometric patterns, some smudges and dark, some battle scarring, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's take a look here and we'll see what we think. All right. All right. Here's our underside and here's our top side. There's our original photo. Okay. So, giving a look at it from this angle, let me say, I think you've done a nice job of, first of all, getting your pin washes down, a very important thing on aircraft like this. You want those panel lines to be nice and solid, and I think you've achieved that. They look really smooth and well separated. I think your color application of the color bars is good. Some of the yellow looks... I understand that what you're going for is obviously some of the paint being scraped, but it feels a little rough in some places. So specifically, I mean, like right along in here, you may want to think of like when you scrape the yellow, you may want the rest to like be minimal with that, be purposeful with it, in that like how you chip in from the edge and crush the edge and get it back to that gray in a little stronger way. It's tough because yellow's so naturally thin that it can kind of easily look like you just didn't, you know, like you didn't get a solid yellow down. I know that's not what actually happened. It's just, it can look like that at a glance. You can change that if you make your yellow tone itself a little more like powerful and vibrant, as opposed to being sort of like that sort of very faint yellow. But I understand, again, you were going for like what's here in the art. But I would point out that if you look here in the art, you'll see how this has more orange tones, and look how big the scrapes are here, right? And the way they drag in, that's how it gets avoided. You see how this passes into the ochre tone? The other thing I would say is I like your sort of like damage streaks and stuff like that, like these sorts of exhaust and those kinds of things. I think those all look good. They all sell. I don't have any issue with any of that. So I all feels pretty good. I understand directionally what's going on here, given the weird shape of this ship. So I think that all feels pretty good. You may want, it feels like there should be maybe one up top here. Like, it seems like somebody would have been shooting for the cockpit at some point. So like, and having one that directionally sweeps backwards in this way will add to the movement of your overall, the way that you perceive the ship. If there's one, like, these go in a lot of different directions, and for good reason, because ships are flying around all, you know, swippy dippy around each other. There's no reason why they'd be playing chicken straight at each other. So like narratively that works. Visually and compositionally, one that's going the same direction as the strongest line in the ship will help still orient the eye subconsciously. Flipping back here, this will give us a better vision of this. The only thing that, or the thing that jumps out at me is, I understand the glass in the art looks very opaque and like this, like you can just see the control panel through here where it's translucent. I think I would have liked to see you take this glass to be more exaggerated in its reflective tones. And, you know, you can do that by doing sort of a broadly sweeping dark to light transition or reflection line or something like that. I think it might have looked a little more glassy if you had pushed that up a little farther. The last thing I want to talk about is the engines. Do we have a good engine shot? Kind of like I feel like the engines need to get hotter in the center where you like a ring here and a dot here where they'd be really firing hard, and you need to go a little deeper around the edges. Like push this into a little deeper orange, ochre, etc., just to really kind of sell that they're hot, they're firing, they're making, you know, exhaust, using magical fuel that only Han Solo can steal. But this is great. It's a great repaint. Very realistic. Your color application, the damaging, the weathering, all looks wonderful. So good stuff. Okie dokie. Let's see. Next up, Stefan brings us his first post with a Thousand Suns Sorcerer. It's a fun model. And then Quentin brings us Mortarian. And then, oh boy. Let's say Vargtid. Vargtid? Sure. He's got some Juan Diaz Daemonettes. Boy, can either of you gentlemen know which one I want to take? So, Eric, would you like to take the Zinch Sorcerer for his first post?
Sure thing.
And Kieran, if you wouldn't mind handling the first of 2 Mortarians, and I would love to take the Juan Diaz Daemonettes if that's all right with everybody.
You've earned it.
I'll take the second Mortarian. How about that? All right. So we start out with Stefan and his Thousand Sons Sorcerer.
And so Stefan says, congratulations and welcome to the PMP and for posting your first model to here. It looks like you've been painting a while. You know, initial impression is that there's a lot of skill here. His question is, his strategy with the details was to try and work with contrast to make everything pop. Should he take it further, or is there another way of going about this? I'd love to get some feedback and critique. So I think, first of all, when we're talking about the detail, we're looking at the stuff on the cloak. We're looking at some jewels. We're looking at some markings on the eye, and probably some of the stuff that's on the staff, etc. And maybe even those beads kind of moving in from a blue into a blue-green. And I think there's definitely some opportunity here for more, and I've said it in the last one. That beading is a really great example of being able to move into some greens and still appearing blue. And I think you could work that into some other aspects. But if we're going to focus in on the details, such as the line work on the cloak, and you know, stuff on the eye and the other details, I think the first thing that you do well is you picked out good colors for these. Red is a dark color, and even though it's very saturated, it's very bright, it definitely contrasts with a lot of things, and especially with white. So immediately when you look at this, you know, the white cloth, and then you know, stands out against the dark blues and golds, and then the red really pops off of that as well. So good color choices. Same with the blue and yellow and the staff and on the horns, etc. You know, that blue and yellow slash, you know, green yellow, those are they're not complementary, but they're complementary adjacent, and I'm lost for what that term is. Secondary, complementary. And so some of those things, that color choice does that for you. And so picking the right colors helps make those pop quite a bit. You get into the marking on the face, and interestingly enough, you know, where I was worried about the red and the blue in the decal on a previous model in this series not having enough contrast, here it does seem like the red you're using and the blue you're using, because maybe the blue gets a lot lighter in on his face, it works fairly well. It contrasts very well. And the question is, should you take it further? And I would say, I think there are certainly some opportunities to take that contrast further. For instance, in the white cloth, you could work in the shadows to make the some areas of the white cloth darker than other areas, whether that be going into a blue or into earthier browns. It looks like you've kind of got more of a start with the cold colors for the cloth. And what that would do is that would let things like the corner of the cloth that we see on the far left, that corner would pop in that whole model. So as you're looking at it from a distance, that corner would pop because it's white, and then that detail would pop even further because it's in high contrast to the bright white. Same with, you know, the jewels down on the bottom. They compete right now with the white next to them. So if you were a little bit darker on the cloth, closer to the jewels, those jewels are going to seem brighter next to the gold and a darker cloth than they do now with the white cloth. So, I mean, those are some of the more important details. You get the reds and the blues and the yellows, and there's always opportunity with yellow to kind of blend down and shade down into kind of some dark oranges or browns, and that would help those details pop. Even though they're, you know, working well against the blue, even contrast within the color is going to help kind of draw the eye to even areas of those stripings and be able to make that pop some more. So, you know, I think there's absolute opportunity. And one thing I'd also say too is when you've got good color balance, it moves your eyes around. On the right-hand side with that beading that I talked about being, you know, really good example of blending from blues into greens, I think there's an opportunity for some of those beads or all those beads to also carry some red. And so maybe there's a few beads in there that are red, or a series of beads, or a pattern of beads. And what that's going to do is let you balance. Right now your reds are kind of left. They're pretty heavily represented to the left of the model. And if you put some red on the beading on the right-hand side, that's going to move your eye around from the cloak being kind of the first point of contact up to the eye, over to the beading, down to the jewels on his, not the tabard, but kind of the cloth hanging from his chest, and start that circle over again. So that's what would be my thoughts if you were to push it to pop it, is darken some of the areas of the white cloth around where the details are the most important, and then let those be the brightest whites and therefore contrast with the reds. You know, get some red on those beads so you can move the eye around the model with those reds. And then, you know, where there's yellows and blues, you know, you can push that contrast a little bit more. Those yellows can go a little bit orange or brown to kind of within those stripes have contrast. So I think you've got great base, great blocking, great color choices, and if the details are really, really great. I guess the last thing I would say is I believe that pattern on the cloak is something that's molded into it. Sometimes those can be hard to get line highlighted with the edge of the brush in order for them to pop, and they can be a little bit messy, etc. If you were so inclined, you may be better off scraping that flat and you know, painting those lines freehand. The cleaner that those are, even if you stick with the raised end, you know, that the lines are more cleanly highlighted, that's going to help that pop even more too. So those would be the things you can do to get it to pop. I think this thing looks great. And congratulations again on posting. I hope that you get lots of comments and have a good first experience.
All right. Yeah, great stuff. Mortarian.
Okay. Well, we have not escaped Nurgle, and I'm okay with that, even if Vince is not. But so what we're looking at here is an offering from Quentin. He said in his description that this is actually a model that he painted months ago, put into a paint competition, and came in second. So great recognition already, of course, being second out of, I don't know what the field was. But I guess if what we want to talk about is how can we help you to get to the #1 position? Because of course we at the PMP universally take credit for every win that happens in the painting competition world from our members. So I hope we get you there, and then we can all revel in your solace. Well, I think that what we can talk about here, Quentin, is a number of things that just take that extra step. And what I mean by that is that overall, as I'm looking at this thing, composition balance looks good. Paint application is tidy. It's all in the right place. It's appropriate usage. So what I mean by that is that we have sort of this sort of reddish purple that you've gotten through the wing membranes, and you've also carried that down into the cloth that drapes under Mortarian's armpits and his hood. You've got a little bit of this blue-gray that drapes from there as well, and then triangulates with what you've got working on the base. The armor is appropriately placed, and because these are neutral colors, they form the center of it as a good sound piece. But then we have this big scythe that's waving off on the side that we have to deal with, and we have to counteract that with metallics in the other places. So the pistol does that. That's fine. So that's what I mean by composition is all right. That's perfectly fine. Let's talk about a few things. One small composition thing that I thought of when I first looked at the base of this, and I think he does have a tighter shot of the base with all these little Nurgling friends and happy buddies on there. So you've done the disc base itself with that Agrellan cracked earth business, but then you have this slate gray rock that's on top of it. And my first thought was, why is that rock different than the ground that's all around it? So I guess that's my first thought, is to be more in the real. I think that needs to be not exactly the same color, but roughly the same color as the earth underneath it. And then you're going to, with the little Nurglings that you plop on top of there, you got to hide that sort of rim so it doesn't look like he's plopped on top of there. So I think the easy way to do that is to just go back with your Agrellan earth and slap it on there again so that it overlaps on that base rim and blends it in. You could do the same thing with all that rock face, and you can sort of brush your Agrellan earth up over the edges of that so that the cracked part of it and the crackling kind of blends that in as well. So that's one of several sort of small little tidbits that we can touch on that will get you to that first place thing, the more immersion of the realism. The other thing that I think we can do in a number of places is let's actually go to that frame where we looked at the wings for a second, because I think this is the only one where I have a technique tip for you. So what I notice on here is that you've got a fair bit of wash pooling. What I mean by that is you're using washes, of course, as you should, to accentuate those pock marks and sort of build a little bit of texture around the buboes and the holes that are punched through this wings. But other common terminologies that we use for this is like coffee staining or ring around the collar and that kind of thing is happening with the washes. So to alleviate that, this is a technique that actually my pal Dallas had shared with me, and that is that you can use a surface tension breaker called like a Future Floor Wax. You might be able to use glazed medium or even some kind of flow improvers that kind of help that out a little bit so it doesn't coffee stain as much. I know that, Vince, you've talked about that a few times too, and I think you have a direct video that addresses it.
Yep.
Do you remember off the top of your head which one that is to reference into?
I don't remember the exact video, but yes, like any flow aid or anything like that will work. Something you could use, even a very small drop of like dish soap if you didn't want to do anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's what that future floor wax or
right
floor wax thing is. It sort of does that. So that's something I think that is worth tidying up as far as your wash application, because that pooling sort of takes us away from the illusion of realism a fair bit on that kind of thing. Going back to the main model itself, the other things that I think that you can do, and again, these are next steps beyond your already good foundation, is I've talked about metallics enough in the non-metallic variety for the last couple of models that I looked at, so we may as well talk about it in the real metallic variety while we're at it here. And that is that you still got to think about how it reflects. So can we look at, well, actually, let's pause here. So looking at that plasma pistol, for example, right on the top here, you got your highest highlight spot right on the very top. And like most of us, Quentin, you're highlighting that in the same way that you would highlight any other opaque surface. So the closest to the sun is the brightest point. But not so with metallics. So on this thing, it's where the curvature starts to turn and go away is where the light will catch. So it kind of is a little bit off angle on either side of the very top is where that will catch and reflect from on the curvature of it, right? If you want to sort of get a sense of this, the other thing that I can offer you for this is if you look at your model when it's just primed, and if you happen to do black priming for doing metallics, or you just do a flat black for the places that are going to paint metallic, that's actually okay to do, despite the advice that you very often get about doing zenithal highlighting. You can do that with metallics. But when you do, when it's in that black state, put it right up to your light, right? Put it right up to your light, and then look really closely and take a moment to look really closely at where the points of whitest reflection is on that flat black. And that's the points that you need to remember is the most highlighted point of your metallic, right? So do try that, and hopefully that'll give you a better mapping of where to put that thing. But just like the non-metallics, reflections are weird. They're not the same as opaque surfaces. So you do have to be, and you can do that with metallics just as you can do it with non-metallics. It's certainly possible, and looks way better when you can master that. Yeah, a few other quick things is I think that we talk about horns and bones probably more often than we should on this PMP stuff. But the big spikes, the big spiky horns that come out of this guy's shoulder pad and the few other spaces where he's got bone, I think to show the rotting bone, you've probably seen it on other Nurgle models where they transition from like a really dark brown into an ivory, maybe not even all the way to white. But I like that look for the Nurgle stuff. And I think if you were to try that when you work up from the either from the root of the bone as a very deep brown and work your way to ivory to the top tip, that's fine. It also works in the reverse, amazingly enough. And that looks good too when you're starting with super dark charcoaly brown on the tip and work your way back to the root. Just make sure that you're doing those sort of overreaching fingers and you're not doing color band where one color stops and the next one begins as you move it down. But I do want to say these are all, as I want to frame it, as improvements to an already good foundation. I can certainly see why you got recognition for this model, because it's a wonderful exhibition of all kinds of different textures. You've put verdigris onto your brass. You've worked in that washes to make the roddy look roddy. The addition of all that extra interest on your base is certainly worthwhile. We noticed some rusting on the other steel metal, and all that stuff is well done. So just take these few things as improvements that we could all work on. And I hope that you can take a few of those tidbits away, Quentin.
Absolutely. It's a very challenging model, that's for sure. There's so many different textures and things to work on with him. He's a beast. Great job. All right. So Varktid with his daemonettes. We've got the famous Juan Diaz daemonettes. Okay, so I'm gonna focus on sort of one main piece of feedback for you here, and that has to do with the skin on these gals, because I feel like the claws and things like that all works fine. We've got a nice transition. Your color palette choice is fine. I have no problem with the blue, the purple, and this sort of like, let's call it almost a pinky orange. The main thing that I would challenge you on with these, and I think where you have the opportunity, is with the skin. Now, I know how small these girls are. They're actually quite a bit smaller than the modern daemonettes, unfortunately. But I think that in that lies an opportunity all the same. They have wonderful curves and sort of stances and ways that they're posed. I mean, that's one of the reasons that they're very famous. And so what I would challenge you on is bringing a little more life and tonal variation into that skin. When we look at things like the face, some more light into the upper cheeks, the soft, subtle, almost non-nose they have, but the ridge of the brow, the bottom of the belly here, how he sculpted it to come out a little bit. So a little bit of light catch here. Like when we have things like these raised knees or these thighs that are stepping out. pushing this into a different color tone, maybe more fleshy, maybe adding a little pink white or something like that, to really show their skin has some interesting variation to it. Skin is such a wonderful palette to play with. It always has a high amount of variation, and it's a great opportunity to experiment. So I think that would be actually the main thing I would challenge you on, because the rest of it, I think, honestly looks pretty good. You've got good variation in the cloth and in the claws. It's just the skin that we don't have it. So that would be my feedback for you. That's my one big thing I'll give you to work on. I say that because it is a big thing. Tonal variation on skin is one of the biggest, most challenging things. So there you go. All right. So next up, we've got Jordan White, who also has some questions about non-metallic metal. We have another Mortarian, and we've got a Ghosty Boy from Lucas Schultz. So I'll tell you what. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to suggest, how about we have somebody else talk about non-metallic metal to get a different perspective?
Sure.
Just so you guys have different thoughts on it too, and your own ideas.
Sure. So why don't we do this? Why don't I take the Robute Gulaman and Mortarian? I want to take a crack at Mortarian here. Also, I'll take back to back here. If Eric, you would like to take the Ghosty Boy, I feel like you have some good experience there.
I do.
And then Kieran, if you can help Chand out, we'll give you the most time because Chand has a big challenge, and that is to say he did a lot of work and he just wasn't happy with it. Chand's a great painter, so maybe we can figure out what we can do to help him out there.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start out with Robute Gulaman. All right, so he talked about the non-metallic metal effect. Now we have a little bit of a bright directional light here. Like we want to make sure we get so picture taking advice, go back. We've been a couple videos since we talked about this. Don't take a picture of a figure like this under your direct lamp that doesn't show your work very well. Get non-direct lighting in front of a neutral background and give us the photo like that. It's much easier to properly evaluate. Okay. Now, all that being said, I'll focus my attention here on the non-metallic metal. And what I will say is that overall, you've got some nice use of tones. Your light placement feels pretty good. Again, it's a little hard to tell because we're slightly overexposed. But where we probably need to focus is mainly on two things. And that is specific light catches. Okay. So like more focusing a light direction of how it's hitting. Like, let's say we have our light coming from this direction, then we would want a strong light catch here, 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 right? So it looks like the light has this reflection line that comes straight down the edge of him. You can pick any point you want. It doesn't, like, I'm not saying it has to be in that place. I'm saying something like that, right? The second thing I'll say is that your non-metallic metal here is very cold. Now, that's fine if that's what you want, but then we still need to work some other tone into it. You tend to go here from your white into a pretty weak yellow and into a black gray. Now, I think on this figure, given what he is, that he's supposed to be like a champion of the Imperium and good and has a fire sword, I think warm NMM will generally serve you better. So working in more sepia tones, red tones, strong ochres in your mid transitions there, and you can still take it to dark, would be good. That's really going to sell the effect. There's lots of different paints you can use to do this, from glazing with different mixes of GW glaze colors to just, getting out like rust colors and thinning them way down. All these things are possible, but adding those warm tones will make a big difference and probably align better. Now, if you wanted to stay cold, if you want to stay with this cold gold, because that's your goal, you got a goal of cold gold, then that's fine. I have no issue with that. But then you're going to want something besides the black to really transition there. You want to take the deep, you want to have some mid transition tone there. Can be a dark brown black, can be a black brown purple, something like black leather from scale 75, something with some kind of color to it to show the light pollution of the low shadows. Okay. So I think working on that kind of a transition and adding a little more life in there is what will really sell that effect. So that's my thoughts on your NMM. But overall, like, it's well handled. You've got a really nice control of your edge highlighting, obviously. Lots of that is placed well. So it's strong work. Okay. So now, hey, Morty. All right. So we got a Mortarian. Primarch of the Death Guard. So let's talk about this dude. Now, there's a reason I wanted to review this guy. And that is because he has chosen the Death Guard colors that I love. He went for classic Heresy era Death Guard colors, the white gray. I cannot explain how much more I like this color scheme than the like sort of pukey baby poop green that is the Death Guard color now. Like, this is so much stronger. I just, yeah, I don't want to go on a rant. I don't want to go on a rant here, but this is a better color. So anyway, love it. It's clean. It's smooth. I love how you executed it. I love that you then chose to make his cowl this nice dark black to contrast against that. I think that's real good. Now, compositionally, I like that you also chose to balance this smoky stuff coming out of his sort of pestilential breather here with adding these then additional tones down at the bottom of his robes. So you created a nice little color triangle of your bright blue green here. So well done on that. The pieces that are rusted look heavily rusted. So that all looks good. I think where we have some opportunities is a couple places. So first off, with the bones, you've got somewhat of a transition. You could push it farther. This fig is dealing an ultra high contrast because you picked a white-black scheme. Sell it everywhere. So give it, like, take the bone to black and make the tip white. Like, give me the full spectrum of the transition. Okay. Same with the wings. You need, like, upping the contrast on the wings, especially pushing some more speckling or stippling toward a more fleshy, brighter color here, especially around the edge, would do a long way to continue to frame this model, and it would create rings of light dark effects, which is always something that looks very good. So if you had you'd have an outer ring of lighter color between pushing this to a higher highlight, and then this down here, the bright thing on the pistol, and then it would go dark with the wings and this little dude here and the scythe, and then we would come into a lighter color of the armor and then dark and so on and so forth. Okay. So, so I think that's one of my feedback. The second thing is the plasma of the gun doesn't really work. It's a little too high, hot, weak, right? Like, you went for this sort of plasma effect of like the almost airbrush OSL. It just feels too bright. It's too white, too light blue. It looks too skyy blue. Like, plasma effects aren't that overwhelming. And it doesn't feel like actual hot plasma because it lacks the deeper contrast color to actually pop the plasma effect out. So what you want to do with your plasma is avoid this like sky blue color you're using purely here and bring it into a more rich blue downtone. And also probably don't go quite as overwhelmingly strong. Like, so much of this tip is white, it just looks like white paint. Right? Whereas if you had a couple dots of very tightly focused white, it would actually look a lot hotter. Yeah, I think that's my feedback for you there. All in all, you did a lot of great things here. The weathering, the rust looks really nice. One other quick thing you may want to think about is some streaking. Like, your orange and your rust effect looks really nice on places like here on the knee. It's great to, out of these pocks, run a little speck down. Like, take a streak and run it down and then kind of fade it out. There's a couple places where you can do it on him. Even like one or two of those happening very weakly is something you notice as having a big effect. So there you go. All in all, though, really great job. I love this Mortarian. He looks awesome. Okay. Time for the Ghosty Boy.
All right. So yeah, I have I had an opportunity to paint this guy when it came out from our local, and what I love about this release is the opportunity to do different textures, and I think through all the things that we've reviewed today, as if this was one day, and other, in the past, is that whenever you have opportunities to explore multiple textures in one model, it just gives the viewer something to kind of relish in. Now, first of all, you even add to that with your basing, and I really like the basing you've put together. That rock outcropping or the dirty, clumpy dirt feel of that. The different types of foliage, the tufts with the kind of flowery stuff on top or the dusty stuff on top. All that matches really well with kind of the yellows that your model goes into, the purples, etc. So great job putting all of that together and kind of having it all feel like it's part of the same. The purple flowers almost make it kind of do some OSL effect for you on the base, which may be intentional. And if so, I think commendable, kind of working that all together. In that regard, you do also see a really good working on the metal of the helm. This is one of those things where you've got this very ethereal thing. You've got opportunities for bones. You've got opportunities for flesh. You've got leather, all those sorts of things. And you definitely are working the rust on the helm. And I feel like there's tons of weight to that helm there. And in contrast, the cloth coming off of him is very ethereal and has lots of blends and things kind of making it feel light. I do think that the horse or the beast that he's riding, the purples and blacks there, I don't feel like you've given them quite the same attention that you've given either his helmet or the back of his cloak. And maybe that in some cases I think that could be okay in that it allows the rider and the cloak to be highlighted and to be kind of the focal point. But there are a couple of textures with the bones, with the flesh, where if you gave me just a little bit more delineation, that the kind of the flesh, if the bones were all this purple color, and the flesh was the black or the something darker, that would help me pick out those different things. So for instance, on his front legs, you've got the bones in the purple with a little bit of a dry brushed highlight, and then transitions into the black on the forelegs. But then over the rib cage, you've also got flesh there that I think could have stayed black, and then letting the bones underneath peek out and be contrast. So help those transitions of texture by delineating the colors there a little bit more. I don't think you needed to go into like some other color, because the brown and the purple and the black do a good job of being contrasting enough, but not being overpowering compared to the greens and the rusts and the other things. But when I'm done looking at the bright elements and I want to go back and look at the other details, your delineating those a bit more will help me see those and appreciate those and know what other things are going on in the model, etc. So that would be my only critique. It would be just probably zero in on the flesh and bone delineation on the horse itself and giving it a little bit more attention, to balance out with the rust and metallics of the helm, the weight of the helm, and the ethereal nature of his cloak. But all in all, again, the basing is fantastic, and you've got a really great model. I can't wait to see this whole army photographed, as you mentioned. So, great job.
Right on. Okay. Next up, we've got Chand and his Underworld's warband.
Yes. So Chand actually posted a rather, I guess I read it as an emotional plea here, and that he's maybe being a little bit hard on himself. He describes in there that he wants to get this kind of stuff to Golden Demon standards so he can be a competition painter that way. But being hard on himself that he's not there yet, and he feels that he's not progressing. So let me say this up front. Fantastic of you for aiming to that. Wonderful. And yes, you should aim for that. As many of us want to improve at what we do, and the whole point of our PMP is not necessarily to get everybody to the Golden Demon painting competitions, but to get better at what they do. So I'm glad that you embrace that. But let's, like myself and both of us and both the other guys here, progress is a long road, and we all need to improve in increments before we get to the pinnacle. So having said that, let's get into it and see if we can give you some real pointed suggestions for you to think about that might take it there. So going through the whole warband, there's the challenge of a lot of different textures that you're dealing with here. So flesh in a couple of different tones, metallics, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that I've talked about enough about metallics already in the no metal style. I think that, again, you just have to be a student of the light placement and the light catch and where that reflects. It's not uniformly going to reflect. You sometimes have to take into account environmental effects too. And once you get the hang of non-metal metal or even real metallic metal in its sort of isolated vacuum, and if you choose one light point and reflect it from there, and you do lots of models and practice that to make it fluid, then I think the Golden Demon level to that, or the painting competition level to that, is then you then step it ahead to the next advanced point, and you consider the whole environment, what's right next to that guy and what's reflecting off of him, and that kind of thing. So that's sort of an existential answer about no metal metal, but I would just say go to those couple references that I've put out. There's a number of other videos about the light reflection and doing the technique of no metal metal that I think you can reference. So let's move on from that and let's talk about a few other things. On the sword of this guy, and you had another model that had a few frames of the guy with the sort of the sickle scythe in his hand that was done in the same kind of purple magical reflective style here. I think I like the idea, first off, is what I want to say about that. But maybe what I want to say about it is better demonstrated on that side model, if you can flip ahead to that one for us, Vince. I can't remember the name of the character of all these little dudes in there, but next one, I think he's got one more frame of this guy that's actually the best shot of that. Yeah, here we go. This is the one I wanted to look at. So here, you've done it in the same way as the non-metal metallic, even though it doesn't necessarily behave in the same way that we perceive gold and silver to do. But I think you've actually kind of nailed it on this one. So you have a reflection coming up off the ground that does the underside of that scythe curve. And then the inside of the scythe, even though it's closer to the sun, in a way, is not the reflective part. So you've caught that idea, and I think that reads well. So I think this is something that you can sort of think about and focus and build upon when you're doing the other stuff. You've gone from a really deep purple to a nearly white, and in fact, on the blade edge of the curvature, it is in fact full-on white. Think about how much dark there is in that purple compared to how much dark there is in your gold on this shield. And if you see what I mean, there's only a few light spots where it gets very dark at all. And that's something that you need to push contrast on in the non-metallic style to push that all the way through. I think your blends look soft enough in there, but I think there's just overall, it ended up too much on the bright side and not enough to contrast it on the dark side there, Chand. So I think that's my last conclusion about the non-metallic. The other thing that I think is worthy to talk about, especially on these last two models, if we can get a front shot of this one, if you can go back one frame, and on the late, and we can flip back and forth between that and the female version of this acolyte, to get what I mean. So your application of paint on the flesh is really good. You've done a great job of muscle definition and shape and contrast. But again, to go to that sort of golden demon level of things, you have to have some really forced shadow, and incorporating some other colors into this flesh tone. We talked a little bit earlier about how flesh tone can very often have some blue tone in it, in its shadow. It's not always red and rosy and that, especially Caucasian flesh. It's so interesting that you can incorporate all kinds of other colors into it, greens even, violets. Any of those color tones can appear in skin, and any of those color tones that you're able to add in its subtleties is going to really enrich the flesh tone and the character of all these models that you're dealing with. So the placement of that sort of thing that I'm thinking about when I look at this lady here, if we're going to call her a lady, is obviously under her chin and her neck. You've left it a little bit darker, but that's actually places where it could be bluish. The bottom side of the thighs, underneath the arm, the sort of in between the fingers that's gripping the sword. Those are all a few places, and down towards the toes as well. There could be some bluish tone that's worked into there. You have to obviously do this very subtly because you don't want to have a hard blue against all of this. But there's plenty of reference. I'm trying to think of who does really good flesh tones of interesting colors off the top of my head. Roman Lapat is a guy to follow. That Vince Venturella guy, I think, is okay at this kind of thing. Sam Lenz does
moderate.
Sam Lenz does a fair bit of that as well.
Sam has beautiful skin tones. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, with lots of added character. So I think that if I read you correctly, Chan, where you're at right now is where a lot of people are at, and that is that they are very. You're a very adept painter. All your application of paint and color is really good, and you're just sort of taking that next step into the realm of real world lighting and environmental effects and all that next level stuff. So I think that your approach, or maybe you're in there, and you want to understand it better. So I think at this point, you're becoming a student, and you got to soak up and try out and experiment, and try and fail a bunch of times to get to that competition level painting. So stay with it, my buddy. We're here to help you along because we're all at those same varying stages. Just giggling because I'm about to say we'll get through this together.
Right, we all get there together. That's right. Okay. So let's see. We got our last three here. So first up, we've got Velatron and his PMP submission. His first one. He has a great conversion here. So Eric, I was hoping you could take this one.
Absolutely.
Because this is a conversion right up your alley. We've got Laurent, who's got a nice little, who's got his first test model for his Ideneth here. And then I will take, if Kieran, you want to handle that. And I'd love to take Thomas Berg's Spite Revenants here. We'll end the month. All right. So we start out with Velatron.
Yeah.
And I'm just so you know, Eric, I'm stepping away for like 1 minute. So I'm going to leave you on this picture.
All right. Yeah, that's not a problem. This one does a lot for us. So Velatron, very active on Twitter, and had the pleasure of working with him on his avatar for over there and some other spots. And he's got a very kind of Bretonian or old medieval knight head kind of conversion throughout his army. And in this case, this is his Star Drake, and he's using Carnosaur body and using Stardrake bits, the armor on the front, the head, and then he's using a number of things, I think, from Archaon, etc., as the Celestant on top. You know, all in all, just he does fantastic conversions, and then when he gets into the paint, there's some really great things that are happening from the transition on the scales from the blue at the top down to whites or silvers underneath, contrasting that with the warm tones of the armor, kind of that bone-colored armor. But you can see in there that there's, you know, everything from kind of greens in the dark areas down to, you know, cream colors, and so, but it all reads as bone. And so he does a fantastic job in the, you know, shadows, in blending, in contrast, etc. And then, you know, on the basing, you've got fantastic kind of crumbled ruins, and there's blues, there's rusts colors, there's, you know, dawnstone highlights, etc. So there's just a lot of tones that he goes into, and then you can see you can see flecked inside there a lot of points of heat, with whether it be his hammer or his maul staff with fire there, and then on jewels on his chest, and on different aspects of the Carnosaur tail or the Stardrake's tail. So you know, all around, it just, there's a great great movement of elements or balance of elements around the model, so that the eye moves around and takes a look at these different things, and etc. Why don't we move go through the pics a little bit now that you're back, Vince, and we'll get some really cool shots so you can see more of those fiery highlights here. Here, this up close, you can see a lot of tones in the armor, which I think look really great. You know, that armor looks very beat up from darks up to lights, and then even some texture there, where, you know, pockmarked and aged and beaten. And so some great work there. When we keep going, I want to get a place, because I think, here's some other elements to the same army, and so we can take a look at these real quick. What I was hoping to get is a little close up of the armor, where he does just fantastic armor damage, etc. And he's real consistent throughout in his use of the blues, down to the cold blues up to the warm creams, and then the silvers and coppers for the metals. I think he's got a few more pieces in here. I didn't get a chance to look at all these before, so I don't know if you want to flip through the rest of those, Vince. Yep. So even here, he's using the lantern to bring the blue in, where there's not a mount or something to that effect. Yeah, I mean, all around, I think you've done such a great job. You can see on the metal on this glaive, it looks like that axe is all beat up, because he's, you know, highlighted it with some you know, grooves and some slashes, etc. This one in particular, I think the OSL is good. You probably could have. It goes into the green, which maybe that's meant to go over top with the yellow of the banner. That would turn a little bit more green. I think maybe could meet that a bit more. But I like where you've gone with it, the hourglass there. All I'm doing is praising it, so I don't have any critiques at this time. I think you did a great job with the conversions, and you know, from the subtle head swap to the Carnosaur Stardrake, and yeah, I hope you keep posting and post some work in progress for us in the community, so that we can all take a look and see the progress.
I agree. All right. So next up, we've got our Idneth from Laurent.
Laurent.
There you go.
Yeah.
What I said.
It'd be a silent T. Anyway, you know what? As these pop up here, it occurred to me we haven't actually seen that much Idneth stuff.
No, we really haven't. It's a shame, because they're such an aesthetically varied army. But yeah, we haven't.
Yeah, and these little eel boys are actually pretty pleasing. It's a pretty cool dynamic model. To do the critique on these things, actually flip ahead if you would. I think it's 2 to 3 frames, because he's got a little bit of a lighting problem that's getting us to shine on this. One more frame ahead. Yeah, let's pause on this one here. I think this one has a little bit of less fuzzing out because the light is a bit better. Anyway, so Laurent had a couple of few pointed things to say about this. First of all, he's back into painting after about a 10-year hiatus. So as always, welcome back. I'm glad you found us, and hopefully we can keep up your enthusiasm about it. But pointedly, the things that he wanted to say in here is he was going for a look of ice for the armor on both the elves and the eels, and then to get a little bit of an old statue kind of metallic going on his weapons and shields. So those are the things we'll focus on. But I want to say quickly before we do that I like your paint application across the board here, and the fact that you have put some ribbing texture into your eel's skin, and pulled in some oranges to counteract the purple. I think those kind of color choices really play off well against one another, and I like everything about that. I also like the fact that you gone with the pale underbelly on these eels that we don't get to see all the way through, but is going to do well for the sake of composition and balance of the models overall. But let's talk about ice armor first of all, and with the lighting that you've given us, Laurent, I want to say, have you achieved the idea that it looks like ice? Well, yes. But I think that to go further with it, ice is a tricky thing because obviously it's to a great degree transparent. So when we often see it as blue, as its predominant color that goes on along with the pale whiteness of it, that's because we're seeing it under sky. Now, if you imagine these guys above water, then obviously that's what it'll look like. But it wouldn't be wrong to go into some greens or even some sort of, well, if you go into purple a little bit, you could, because you've got that stuff reflecting around you. Now that's all probably pretty advanced level stuff to start considering what is on the other side of that ice. So for instance, the stuff that's layered over the eels is probably going to read a little bit more purple than the helmet that's on top of the elf, because he's got, a warm flesh tone underneath there. So it's going to pick up on some of that as you shine through. When you're doing this across a whole army, I don't think that you should really think about that depth of it. And in conclusion, I would say that with this stuff, I think your only thing to do is stick with the blue, maybe touch it with a little bit of deep purple in some glazing, but where you go dark, go a little bit darker. Is the simple fix to I think just do one extra level on this. The other thing I want to say about the armor is I do not like it so much how you've done that on the stirrups, though. There's something confusing about how you've made the ice stirrups try to look like that. I think that if you're to continue with this, you pair up with the way that you've done the weapons and shield for the stirrups of these things. Now, so let's talk about weapons and shields. If you flip to another frame, I think we get one where we look at the shield front on. And that'll probably be a better way to talk about that. All right, here we go. So when you said it in the text up here, Laurent, when you referred to old statues and how they look, I assume what you've leaned into here, you're trying to go for, is that really heavy verdigris bronze that you see on fountain statues and things like that. And I think that that's great, but I think that the way that you can actually pull this off and tie it into the other thing that you asked about, and that is that, to allude to that, you mentioned that you were going to do these guys on a sandy reef base, which is obviously going to be a sort of a warm, light brownish color. And how do you balance that against the model up above? Well, I think that's an opportunity, actually. If you let some of the actual metallic and the deep brown and metallic bronze of this show through in some of these places on the shield and the weapons, I think that will balance nicely with what your intentions are with the bases. So to achieve this, you'd have to lay down your metallics first and then do this heavy verdigris over top of it. But you can go super heavy. Like, it almost does turn if it's been exposed for, you see statues that have been out there for 100 years plus. They do almost turn almost entirely green, and you see very little in the low areas of what's showing through for the metallic. So I think you lean into that. I think that's what would be pleasing for me, and it'll give you that aspect of balance versus what your intended finished product is going to look like. Yeah, so run with that. That's my couple thoughts for you, and a couple theories. And unless you two gents have anything to add to that.
No, I hope we see more. That's my only thought.
I actually want to recommend. I have seen a lot of sandy. If you're doing sandy base and they're outside the water, or going to the browns. Steve Foote shared a documentary of was the wreckage of the unbelievable, and it had a bunch of statues underground and all that kind of stuff, or underwater. And the sand underwater has a lot more tones like your shield, where it kind of is a lot of blues and then up to maybe a yellow. So it could be an interesting way to tie in your shield colors to the basing as well.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
That is a nice idea. I like it. All right. So Thomas Berg says he's working on some Spite Revenants. And what do you think about the paint job? And so let's take a look. All right. Well, my first thought about him is I really quite like I say it all the time, but I'm going to say it here because I really like it. I love the tonal variation on these, especially in the green. So obviously green and purple are classically great colors. They are just sort of a wonderful, they speak to evil, and what Mr. Glass said, green and purple, it's your classic villain colors, Lex Luthor's power armor and all that. And I think you've captured it well here using like the dark violet with the bright yellow green. The variation on the wood is what I really, really enjoy. You really did a nice job of stretching that out into something very bright, but your deep shadows on the green go quite deep. So that looks really wonderful. On the purple, I think maybe I'd like to see their weird super claws have a little bit more highlight to them. You take the faces way up, which is perfect because the face is a focal point and you needed to really over highlight it to counterbalance the fact that there's that bright yellow green basically surrounding their face. So that's good. I feel like the claw though is also a point of attention, like the purple claw. Your yellow claw gets hotter than your purple claw, right? So I think you do a good job on some of the like forward shoulder muscles of really popping some highlights. And like that level is what I'd love to see stretch down the claws. It'll make them feel sharper and more menacing if they pop out like that. Okay. But overall, I think these are absolutely fantastic for gaming miniatures. Some other quick thoughts if you wanted just some stuff to do. The red of your leaves you could work into a couple other small places, like you could make their little tummy gems the red. You could make some of the little like this guy has the little pattern on his knee. You could work it into the recess. Like you could spread that around a little more just so you had a little bit of that pop color present in some other places. It's not absolutely necessary. It could just be a little extra visual interest. And then finally, when you're laying down these grass tufts over dirt, we want to do a little more than just kind of stick them on. And so what we want to do there is you want to take some wash like some Agrax or something like that, or Seraphim, and really get it on a brush, get a nice dollop on a brush, and stick it down in the bottom here. Like force your brush down against the side like this. So you stain the lower parts of the plants and the ground around it. It will actually make the plant look like it's sitting in the ground, because it'll look like the mud is up on the plant, which of course it would be, right? As water runs all through the plants and stuff, and mud runs up and down and leaves sorts of these stains, the bottom of plants tends to be very muddy. And that'll make the tufts really feel like they sit in the environment. So don't be afraid to paint your tufts. That's what I would say. And that can mean sticking some wash in there. It can mean getting a little bit of highlight, like dragging a brush across the top to add some extra color with, like, take some ivory, get it on the end of your brush, and basically think of it like dry brushing the tips of just the grass pieces can do a lot. But the wash is really the main key, because that makes it look like it's actually connected to the earth. But overall, these guys look really good, man. I think you did a great job. Here's the other 5. You know, same thing holds true here. You know, basically same thoughts. Again, wonderful, wonderful green and green yellow, and really good execution. I think you did a wonderful job. I think I want to see more of this army. All right. So with that, gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our month. And you know what that means.
That means we had another super month.
It does mean we had another super month. This was an absolutely great month. So who has a pick for their favorite for the month? What did you enjoy the most?
I got one for you.
Okay.
I want to harken back to the undead warband that Sumer had done with his very super characterful skeletons done in the Empire style.
Oh yeah, sure.
With some great glow effect from lanterns and locust bugs and swampy ground underneath.
Yeah, the purple and like light blue and green skeletal warband. Yeah. Yeah, it was great looking.
I really felt it was full of character.
I agree. I think that's a great choice. Eric, what about yourself?
Man, I'm a little torn. I think I'm going to give mine to. I want to give it to Velotrons, but I was really enamored with Emil's Sylvaneth.
Yeah, those are good. I like that. His Sylvaneth were really solid. See, he was from the first half of the review. He had the Alariel and everything, just like incredible basing. Yeah.
Yeah, I want a dock for the amount of basing, but just kidding. No, they just looked amazing, and a lot of contrast, keeping things dark and almost silhouetted, and then up into the brightness. So, just a lot of great qualities to that.
Yeah, for me personally, it's got to be Surface Tension's Frazetta recreation piece that we just, we reviewed. I love it. I love Frazetta's art, using the oils on it, translating the scene. He didn't try to recreate it exactly, right? He actually translated it and set it in the mortal realms. The background looked amazing. It was very Bob Ross. It was atmospheric. I dug it. Yeah. So it was definitely my favorite thing. I love that's just, I love seeing art like that. That's what it is. That's what it crosses into at that point fully, right? All of this is us being artistic. There's no doubt, but I love when I see a piece that I just look at and it completely crosses the line into just a great piece of art. So, all right. Well, then let's talk about our final closing things here. As always, if you want to join us on your own hobby journey, hey, look right down there. There's a link. Click that. Join up. We'd love to have you. Whether you're just starting out, as you saw, we had many first-time posters, or a long-time master. If you're interested in taking the next step on your hobby journey, we would love to have you. At the same time, to all our community members who are offering constant feedback and praise and constructive criticism and everything in every post, you are the heroes of this community. You are what keeps the grist in the mill. We love doing this once a month, but the reality is all of you who are commenting regularly, that is what makes this community such a positive, wonderful place. I love seeing it. I love knowing. Sometimes I'll go to answer a question that I see it in my email. I go to answer it 20 minutes later and 3 people have already answered it. And it blows my mind. I love it. Nothing makes my day more than that. So thank you all so much. Let's keep seeing those wonderful submissions. Gentlemen, any final closing thoughts from you?
Did you want to touch on Hobby Challenge closing out this month?
The hobby challenge closed out. I'm going to do a separate video on it, but yes, I'll say this. That one closed out. You'll see a separate video on that probably next week. I have to travel here starting tomorrow until next week, but you'll see it at the end of next week. And with all the voting and everything around that. And I already know what our next hobby challenge is going to be, and I am very excited. So look for another one, probably not too far in the future. It won't be in November, obviously. We gotta give a little cool down period, but we got a very fun one coming up.
Yeah, I did a bit of a scan of all the final submissions for the hobby challenge, actually, and I think we did a good thing.
It was amazing.
Abolished a lot of gray plastic.
Oh my gosh, it blew my mind. It blew my mind as they've rolled in over the past couple of days. Seeing all of those armies, basically, right? Just people getting that stuff painted was amazing. So yeah. Wonderful. Eric, anything final from you?
No, yeah, just there was a ton of, first models, first submissions, fifth model, all that kind of stuff. I think it's a tribute to the community that some of these first postings are looking like, they've been
somebody who's been painting for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, keep it up, keep lifting each other up and submitting this just to get it out there and get the, even if it's the first time getting a critique on something, letting other people critique your stuff is the best way to move forward and get better. So
absolutely agreed. All right. Well, for all of you who watched, thank you very much. Appreciate it as always. We'll see you next time.